And we're live. Welcome to this week's happy hour, everybody. Welcome to Stories and Sips live on Facebook and on YouTube. We'll give people a chance to join in. So if you're just joining, welcome to this week's happy hour. Another week in the bag, thank God. Another week closer to the end of all this madness. And I think we all need a break, and we all need some light at the end of the tunnel, which I hope is coming soon. So if you're joining us, let us know what you're drinking and where you are. I know that with the earlier time, it's going to be better for some people and it's going to be harder for others, but share with me where you are and what you're drinking. Barton, you're very welcome. If you are joining from the Facebook group, we're streaming for the first time in the Facebook group today, and as such, your comments are going to show up for me as just Facebook user and not your name. So I'll show you what they look like. So to fix that, I need you to go to streamyard.com/Facebook. So let me tell you how to do that. So let me type into the banner here so you see it. It is stream. Let me edit this one. So if you're joining from the group for the first time, because it's a private group, my streaming software can't see who you are. So here's the website, Facebook. Okay, so you go to streamyard.com/Facebook if you're joining from the group. And that way it'll authenticate you, just one click, and it'll allow you to show your comments. Otherwise, I won't know your name. So for those of you watching in the group, Facebook group, just open up another tab, go to streamyard.com/Facebook, and that'll allow me to see your name. So Jacob, welcome. You're joining from Kentucky. Redbreast 12-year-old. James Kearns all the way from Ireland. Good morning to you at this stage. Welcome. Jeff and Dee are joining from Indianapolis. Great to see you all. Barton, you've got your Teeling small batch. Yeah, we'll be drinking some of that in a little bit. So the thing you're seeing on the screen at the moment is if you're watching from the Facebook group, Irish Whiskey Fans of America, if you want your names to show up on the screen and you want me to see who you are when you comment, I just need you to go to streamyard.com/Facebook. And you'll click one thing, and instantly it'll allow me to see your name when you come back here and you comment. So go ahead and do that if you're joining us from the Facebook group. If you don't want to do that, you can also join from Stories and Sips. So live on Facebook.com/Stories and Sips, or also on YouTube. So we've got great familiar faces joining us from all over the world now again tonight. Connor in Dublin, you've got your Teeling single pot still, good man. Tim, you've got your Nap Ogue. Jeff, your wife's stealing your very rare 2018. You want to steal that back? We're going to drink 3 great whiskeys tonight. Sip through them, have a chat. It's going to be these 2 and then this one. So these 3 whiskeys we'll work our way through over the course of the evening. And for those of you who have these, join along with us. We're going to start with the Dingle single malt batch 4 in a few minutes, and then I'm going to move on to the Teeling, and then I'm going to finish with Redbreast 12-year-old. So let me know if you have them and you want to join along with us. So again, those of you who are joining from the Facebook group, you're seeing a website, a URL on the screen. It says streamyard.com/Facebook. That is for you to authenticate your Facebook account so that I can see your comments in this new streaming service that we have. So we've got a new streaming service that allows me to go to YouTube and Facebook groups and Facebook pages all at the same time, which gives us even more access to more and more folks, which is great. Some people don't have Facebook and they wanted to join in. So go to that website, streamyard.com/Facebook, if you're in the Facebook group. And I'll take that off the screen in a second and I won't keep annoying you with it. Timothy's joining us with his Redbreast Chateau Level Barton. Well, it's either Redbreast or it's Chateau Level Barton. Timothy, let us know which one. Might be the green spot that you're drinking. Jack, Jim O'Brien's got the Dingle batch 2 single malt. Great stuff. I'll be opening the batch 4. I should probably open it now, actually, while you're all joining. The Brannigans are here. That's great stuff. Martin's here. Martin Purcell. Nicole, you've got your Tully rum cask. Very good. I saw you posting that in the Facebook group earlier. So let me take this off the screen here so it doesn't annoy you. So tell us where you are and what you're drinking. Todd, welcome. You're watching us on YouTube, enjoying a glass of Slane in Minnesota. Good man yourself. I'm pouring a little drop of the Dingle small batch Dingle single malt batch 4 small batch release. We'll talk about that in a little second. I'll give that a minute or two to breathe there while you're all joining in. MP is starting with Red Spot. Good man yourself. We've got Clonakilty single batch. Paul. Brian says return of the turtleneck. Brian, it is. I have to have some kind of signature. Some consistent visual language, wardrobe language. The turtleneck seems to be it. So yeah, Ron and Renee. Welcome Ron and Renee from Columbus. Melinda, Ron and Renee are joining us. Yeah. Hi from Melinda as well, Ron and Renee. Shane, you've got a drop of Method and Madness, pot still in Douglas. Fair play to you. Yeah, so it's late in Ireland. I know it's midnight in Ireland. It's only what is it here? 4 o'clock in California, 7 o'clock in Ohio, where I know a lot of you are joining, and on the East Coast. But I thought we'd find a way to get as early as possible in the day, because many of us, we've nowhere else to be now, unfortunately. We're locked away at home. We might as well be streaming and talking and having a chat and taking out our whiskies out of the cupboard, dusting down the bottles that have been gathering dust for far too long, having a few sips, telling a few stories and getting together. So thanks everyone for joining. I think the earlier time suits a lot of people, and we'll try and find a way to do more of that. Next Tuesday, I'm going to be streaming even earlier in the day, and noon Pacific time, 8 o'clock Irish time, 5 o'clock Eastern time, 3 o'clock Eastern time. I'm going to be going live with Omar Fitzel from that'sdramgood.com. We're going to do an Irish episode, so streaming predominantly for an Irish audience at that time of the day, but everyone's free to join in, and the links to that are on Stories and Sips on Facebook, so please check that out, and I'll be sharing more of that. Patrick Call from Clonakilty, welcome. Thanks for joining us. Summertime now. It's 11 o'clock in Ireland. Is it, Paul? I thought it was midnight. I thought the clocks went forward. No, maybe that's this weekend. Friday. Yeah, it is. Sure, it's Friday. It is indeed, Shane. Who else have we got here? South Florida. We got Patrick in South Florida sipping Green Spot. Brilliant. So there's what, 65 of us here now all drinking. Lena's joining us from Ireland as well. Hi, Lena. Good to see you. Drinking your writer's tears. Good girl yourself. Stacey, Tyrconnell. We put Lena up here. I'm going to showcase some of your comments here. My fancy new streaming that I've got going here. Ben Lucy's drinking Hibiki Harmony. Ben, you're after going to a different country altogether with your whiskies tonight. What else have we got? Jonathan, you're trying Jameson Caskmate Stout Edition. Brilliant. 3 whiskies tonight. Going to sip through them, have a chat. Feel free to give me some feedback if you've ever tried these before. Devin and Stacey are drinking. Love Dingle as well. Dingle is our first drink tonight, and I don't know if any of you in the US have ever tried Dingle, but I'm going to give you a little bit of history to Dingle, a little bit of story behind it. If you have any questions on any of these whiskies, just jump in tonight, and we'll have I'll see if I can answer them. If I can't answer them, sure, I'll find the answer later, and we'll post it on the Facebook page or post it in the Facebook group. So Dingle is our first whiskey tonight, and it is a single malt whiskey. So let me move Billy Lighton's lovely Redbreast 27 box there for a second. So what we have here is Dingle Batch 4 single malt from the town of Dingle in the southwest coast of Ireland, the most westerly distillery in Europe on the Dingle Peninsula, southwest coast of Ireland, a beautiful part of the world, absolute heaven. On a warm summer's day, there's nowhere in the world I'd rather be than down in Dingle, sipping on a nice whiskey in Dick Mack's pub, looking out at the sun from inside a dark pub. Nowhere else better to be. But Dingle it has become very well known very quickly. There was no distillery in Dingle prior to 2012, and in 2012, a very forward-thinking man opened up a distillery to much ridicule and questioning of his sanity at a time when there wasn't very many people drinking Irish whiskey as there are today. But Oliver Hughes was his name, and Oliver Hughes was the man behind the Porterhouse pub group in Ireland and England and also in the United States. And Oliver had this mad idea to open a distillery in the town that he had gone to for many years as a child, and also had brought his family back there. He lived in Dublin. And he started this distillery. It was the first purpose-built independently owned distillery to open in Ireland in 150 years when it opened in 2012 when they did their first distillation. And in 2015, 3 years after their first distillation, as is the law, they released their first whiskey, Batch 1. And what they do in Dingle is fantastic. It is a manual, hands-on process of distillation where they are distilling barely a handful of barrels a day, not the hundreds a day that are coming out of other big, large distilleries, but they're distilling. When I first visited them, they were doing 1 to 2 barrels a day. I'm not sure if it's maybe increased now, but that was at not far off full capacity. And so they've been distilling single malt whiskey and single pot still whiskey in Dingle since 2012. And every year since 2015, they've released that year's batch. So in 2015, you had batch 1, 2016, batch 2, 2017, batch 3, and then 2018, batch 4. And just released has been Dingle batch 5 single malt. So there's a single malt, which is bottled at 46.5%. This is actually the highest ABV of all the whiskies we're drinking tonight, by 0.5%. It beats out the Teeling small batch by 0.5%. But this is beats out the Dingle by 0.5%. Richard there is drinking the Dingle second pot still from County Antrim. So every year they release their small batch. This is batch number 4. And then they also release a cask strength version of this. And they also, not every year, but they release a single pot still whiskey as well. It's had enormous success in Ireland, massively supported by the people of Dingle, massively supported by whiskey lovers in Ireland, because you had this pretty much I wouldn't say a monopoly in Ireland in 2012, but there were only, 2-3 distilleries distilling in Ireland in 2011, Middleton in County Cork, Cooley in County Louth, and then you had Bushmills in Northern Ireland in County Antrim. And so when Dingle came along, not only were they the 4th distillery to be distilling, but they were the first independent distillery and purpose built in 150 years, which is remarkable. So enormous success, and they funded the establishment of the distillery through a unique program, which we see a lot of them now in new distilleries that are open. But back in the day, in 2011, there was nothing of the sort in place, and that was the establishment of the Founding Fathers program, where you could buy a cask of whiskey, put your name on it, and in doing so, you would fund the building of the distillery, and you'd be able to go back as a founding father and visit your barrel of whiskey every year and have a great party. And I remember seeing the ads for this, or seeing it covered in the Irish Independent newspaper when I was living in Ohio back in 2011. And I was fascinated. I thought, this is amazing. A new distillery in Ireland. This is a chance for me to connect back with Ireland. But there was no way I could have afforded a barrel of whiskey. And so what I did was I tried to get 5 or 6 friends to come in on this with me. I reached out to the distillery and they said, yeah, you can do that. You can form a little group. And none of my friends would participate. So I ended up missing my chance on a cask of Dingle, which I'm kicking myself over, because it would be lovely to have one of those Founding Fathers casks. But Dingle is a remarkable success story, and it is now finding its way over here to the United States. So we've got Mary Ferreter is the brand representative and the general manager of the distillery, and Mary splits her time between Dingle in West Kerry and the United States. I'm going to have Mary on an episode of Stories and Sips to tell us more about the founding, because Mary was there since. Mary's practically the queen of Dingle. Mary, there's nothing that nothing goes on in Dingle without Mary knowing, and everybody knows who Mary is, and she's been a fantastic ambassador for both the town and the distillery, and she has a remarkable connection with the founding of this distillery, and no better person to share with us the stories behind the founding, which are remarkable, and she shared them with me many times, and I never tire of hearing her great in her Kerry accent, sharing with me, a Cork man, the beauty of Kerry and the beauty of Dingle and the beauty of the distillery, and there's no arguing with her. So we'll have her on an episode of Stories and Sips over the coming weeks to talk a little bit more about it. So feel free to put your questions in there about Dingle, as I have a little nose of this batch 4. Jeff says that you can get Dingle whenever you go to Chicago to a certain large liquor chain. Yeah, so it's not widely available in the US yet, and there's a reason for that. There's not that many bottles of it. It is not a mass-produced whiskey. My understanding is that there are 2,000 bottles or thereabouts per batch that make it out. I stand to be corrected on that number, but it's a very small amount. Peter says we'll have to do a company get together for a Stories and Sips barrel. We will. We'll have to do that when it's all over. So light on the nose, but kind of vanilla honey on the nose. Get that lovely biscuity kind of nose from the malt. So this particular batch is triple distilled, like all of their whiskies are. But this one is a marriage of 3 different agings, 3 different maturations. So I'll show you there in the bottle. It's a marriage of bourbon, sherry, and port casks. So what that means is that when the whiskey goes through its distillation and comes out the third still as a clear liquid, it's then put into 3 different types of barrels. So it's split amongst port, sherry, and bourbon. And then at a certain period, the master distiller's job is to marry these malt whiskies together. And single malt just means, of course, it's malted barley that is malted, or that is distilled and aged in one single distillery. It's the produce of one single distillery. It's not multiple distilleries giving their stock to be blended together, but rather single means of one distillery. And so all the malt whiskey is split into 3 different barrels, or 3 different types of barrels. And then at the opportune time, when the timing is right, master distiller will marry sufficient quantities of each together to create the release. And so what we have here is the marriage of 3 different whiskey maturations. 3 different whiskey maturations. So the sherry really comes through on this for me. And I love the marriage of these 3 together. The first release, the second release, younger whiskies didn't have the same maturation, both the time and the complexity. And I think every year that Dingle comes out with a new release, it's getting a little bit more complex. It's getting perhaps a little bit older. We don't know exactly how old this is. We can make a rough guess, anywhere from 3 to 6 years at this stage. But it's a younger whiskey, so you can see the color is a little bit lighter. Here, it hasn't had a 10, 12-year contribution from the wood, but the complexity of the 3 different maturation types helps add flavor, helps add complexity to a younger spirit, which is really lovely. So who's had Dingle Batch 4? Anybody try Dingle Batch 4? Stephen, you're very welcome. Good to see you from Ohio joining. Richard, you've got a wonderful bottle from the Palace Bar. Not quite ready to open it up yet. Yeah, the Palace has a lovely bottle. They were one of the founding fathers, I believe, or they acquired their barrel from a founding father. Interesting story about the Irish whiskey industry in Ireland, obviously, is the support that the larger incumbents have given to these smaller distilleries as they've opened up. So Dingle, obviously a new distillery in 2012, didn't have expertise necessarily in the Irish whiskey industry. And those that did stepped up to support them. So when you go down to the Dingle distillery, you'll see hanging on the wall the heads of the barrels, just kind of markers, just monumental kind of markers for every one of the founding fathers. So if you're a founding father, there's a barrel head on the wall with your name on it. And proudly in the middle of all those founding fathers' barrel heads is one very, very familiar name, and that is the Midleton Distillery. So the Midleton Distillery acquired a founding father cask, not because they want to drink the whiskey, but because they wanted to support a new entrant into the Irish whiskey scene. And not only did they buy a cask from them and become one of the founding fathers, but they've also played a huge role at Midleton in training and teaching and passing on the skills that they have in blending, in distilling, in maturation, and brewing to the new distillers that have popped up. So Midleton regularly hosts workshops and classes for those who are going out into the world and competing with the very products that Midleton are selling. And I think it comes from this idea that we're stronger together. And also, if one small distillery makes a bad whiskey, then suddenly Irish whiskey is tarred with this bad name. So it's nice to see such support for the smaller distilleries from the big distilleries too. So Jeff, you've got a bottle each of the batch 4 and the batch 4 cask strength. You've not opened either yet. Well, Jeff, here's my thoughts on that. We can't take the whiskey with us, and it's no good gathering dust. So I hope you find the chance to open it soon. David's in Massachusetts opening his. Great stuff. Kevin, you're opening batch 4 is your go-to whiskey right now. You love it. It might be one of my favorites now of the Dingle batches that have come out over the past few years. So who else has got some open here now? Let me see. Siobhan. Oh, great stuff. Siobhan Costello. You've got some batch 4 as well. Jeff and Dee, you've had batch 1 and batch 2. Very good. And Peter says the hunt starts. It does. Yeah, that's the challenge when we hear about these whiskies that we might like. It's now we've got to go find them. Bob is sipping Middleton Very Rare. Dahi O'Connell, the man behind W.D. O'Connell Whiskey Brand, has joined us as well. Evening, Dahi. Dahi's going to jump on here and talk to us one of these nights. He might not be up for tonight, but when we have his whiskey up here on this Redbreast 27 box, little perch, Dahi's going to come on and talk to us. We're going to share the screen. I know some of you have been asking for a companion for me to talk to on these live streams. So Dahi's going to jump on, which is great. Looking forward to receiving those. Tim asks for the price on the Dingle. Tim, I don't know exactly how much it is. It depends where you are. I believe in California that this is $69.99, I believe, but I'll double check on that. Hermit says, drink your heart to find bottles. They're worthless until they're consumed. I'd agree with that. Absolutely would agree with that. Who's been to Dingle? Anybody been to Dingle? It's Mrs. Stories and Sips and I spent a great week, 9 days down there. It was a 9 day, 5 days, felt like 9 days. It was so good. Last summer, and one of those nights was out on the Blasket Islands, which are a remarkable collection of islands off the coast of the Dingle Peninsula. Remarkable literary history and literary past. There's no running water on the Great Blasket Island, or there's no hot water on the Great Blasket Island. There's no electricity. You bring your own food out there. You can stay in one of the old cottages, or you can camp. There's no animal predators, so you'd be safe lying on the grass all night. And when the weather's right, it is absolutely perfect out there. So we had an incredible night on the Blasket Islands, and then every night back in Dingle, then into Dick Mack's pub, which for anyone who ever asks, where is Dick Mack's pub? It's opposite the church. And then people say, well, where's the church? And it's opposite Dick Mack's. And you can go in there, and there's an Irish whiskey that's been released in the last 30 years. They don't have on their shelf. Hard to find, rare to find, easy to find, special bottlings just for them. Fantastic place to go down to. The other thing that Dingle's famous for before it became famous for its whiskey was a dolphin. And what put Dingle on the map years ago when I was younger was the appearance of a bottlenose dolphin in the bay, in Dingle Bay. And the dolphin was named Fungi, F-U-N-G-I. And Fungi, the Dingle dolphin, became a huge tourist attraction in 1980s, 1990s Ireland when there wasn't much else to do. Everyone went down to Dingle to see a dolphin. And the very shrewd fishermen would and tour boat operators would bring you out into the bay to see Fungi. But they had a great trick. They wouldn't sell you any tickets. Everyone was allowed to get onto the boat free of charge, and you'd only be charged on the way back if you saw Fungi. And if you didn't, you got a free trip. It was a great little sales trick altogether. There are no fools down in Dingle. And there's a statue, a life-size statue of Fungi, the Dingle dolphin, in the down by the water, down by the pier, actually. And he's still there. He's just been inducted into the Guinness Book of World Records as the oldest living dolphin on record in the world. Many tourists, skeptical tourists, are convinced that it is now a robot that has been constructed and built by the Dingle Tourism Authority to preserve Dingle tourism. But I'd say that if anything ever happened, that poor dolphin, there'd be a fisherman strapping a fin onto his back and swimming around that bay to make sure that the tourists keep coming. That dolphin has been such a source of tourism for the town. But yeah, Stephen says the oldest dolphin in the world. He is. The Guinness Book of Records proves it, which is fantastic. So Timothy asks if I like the Tua over the Glencairn. So this is a Tua glass, T-U-A-T-H, which means family or kind of people in Irish. And it is a uniquely designed Irish whiskey glass, designed for Irish whiskey specifically. And actually, even more specifically for kind of heavier pot still whiskies or kind of a heavier whiskey than a light grain whiskey, perhaps. And the Glencairn then is the Scottish whiskey glass you might be familiar with. I've never been a fan of the Glencairn because I think it's too small. I find it hard to stick my schnoz into the glass, and I like to. And the Tua, it's got a big wide rim, which allows me to put my oversized nose into it and get a good nose of the whiskey. So yeah, I like it. And I also like the fact that I don't like the Glencairn's got the tiny little stubby stem, whereas here I hold the base of this. And to show you the shape of the base, it's pyramidal. So it's 3 sides. And that's also got a connection to Dingle because that is shaped after the Skellig Michael, which is where Star Wars was filmed. And Skellig Michael is one of the islands off the coast of the Dingle Peninsula too. So a lot of Dingle connections here tonight. Fungi batch 5, Dahi mentions. Yeah, they'll need a fungi version number 2 if he ever disappears. All right. So we've loads of Irish joining us tonight. That's the problem now. When we go earlier, the Irish invade or infest the stream here, chancing their arm with their humor and giving each other all kinds of slagging. Everyone's slagging one another in the comments there. It's great to see it. I knew this would happen when I went earlier in a live stream. The Irish would jump in late at night in Ireland now, to be fair. Julie says she's seen Fungi. So much fun. Yeah, I remember seeing Fungi. First time I ever saw him was probably 1999. He was only a young fella then at that stage, but Dingle was already thriving on the back of him. And I remember seeing him out in one of the fishing boats, which was great. Oldest dolphin in the world, indeed. So yeah, Timothy, I like the Tua glass. So hopefully that answers your question. So if you ever get to Ireland, you have to get down to Dingle. It's a remarkable place. Of course, they're also famous for they're in Ireland for their Dingle gin and their Dingle vodka. So there's a huge gin craze in Ireland over the past few years, and you could really credit Dingle for spearheading that because whiskey's a long-term game. When you distill whiskey, you're waiting a minimum of 3 years before you can ever put something into a bottle, and that's an awfully long time to wait to pay for your staff, to keep the lights on, to pay for your warehousing. So what did Dingle do when they first started aging their whiskey? They started distilling gin and vodka, and they've been doing that now since 2012. And so they launched their Dingle gin into the market and their vodka long before their whiskey ever made it and into the marketplace. And they came out with this large, kind of like a burgundy glass, big bulbous glass that became known as the gin glass in Ireland. And so striking was this glass. You had a small measure of gin in the bottom, tons of ice cubes, maybe a string of cucumber or grapefruit. The Irish got very fancy after 2012. And then some elderflower tonic, notions altogether. The Irish with their fancy notions with their gin. And it took the bar scene by it really stormed the bar scene. When I went back to Ireland in 2013, 14, I think it was, I remember for the first time seeing gin menus on tables. So not only did you have a drinks menu or a cocktail menu, now you had a gin menu where you started to choose your gins, you started to choose your tonics, you chose your mixers, and you chose your garnish as well. So Dingle gin has been remarkably successful as well, and very hard for us to get it over here in the US. And I wish we could get more of it because I really, really like the gin as well. Let me see. Nicholas, you tried batch 1 in Ireland and batch 2 in the States. Little too young for you. Batch 2 is available in Massachusetts. Yeah, it's a young whiskey, but I like the one way to overcome a young whiskey is to have a complex maturation, no matter how long that is. And so this multiple caskings here, or this marriage of different caskings, adding this complexity that wouldn't come from just one single aging in one single barrel alone, of course, is creating a older tasting whiskey, but there's no doubt it is still a young whiskey. And in time, it's going to be even more incredible. So I'm looking forward to seeing that. John says that one day he wants to do the Dingle Half Marathon and celebrate at Dick Mack's. John, make sure you do it in that order, because there'll be no Dingle Half Marathon if you start in celebrating in Dick Mack's. But yeah, there'll be few places in Ireland that could offer a selection and a bit of crack and a bit of fun in a pub as Dick Mack's in Dingle. So Timothy says the stem of the Tua is too big for his liking. You have to hold it like a wine glass. Yeah, I just hold it at the base there like that, and I like it. I can also, because it's pyramidal, you can hold it, you can actually put it on its side and it'll lie on the table like that. So you can be all fancy when your friends come around for dinner and they can marvel at your ability to lay out glasses in new and intricate ways. Of course, we can't have nobody coming over for dinner at the moment because we have to lock all our doors to prevent any kind of proximity to other humans. So Pete is having his first taste of Jameson Black Barrel this evening in Belfast, celebrating his birthday. Happy birthday, Pete. Great drop of whiskey. Love Jameson Black Barrel, one of the whiskies that got me into Irish whiskey. Until then, I suddenly stumbled upon Redbreast, and that was the end of my savings after that. But happy birthday to you, Pete. You're very welcome. Connor mentions the Norland glass. Yeah, there's another glass, the Norland's like a rocks glass. It's kind of like a double hull glass as well. Nice looking glass. Stacey said her husband drank her whiskey. You're going to have to tell Devon to find another bottle for you, so Stacey. Tom O'Regan's in from Cork. Brian needs to get hold of one of these glasses. Julie, you're onto the Dublin or DWD Heritage Edition. Very nice. Nicholas wants to know what I think of the Dingle pot still releases. Yeah, I've enjoyed the pot still, but I'm more of a fan of a much older pot still myself. Redbreast 12 has ruined it for me, because now anything younger than that, I really find it's hard to get my head around it. And of course, any other pot still is going to be younger than Redbreast 12, isn't it? Because there's been no distillery in Ireland that has been producing pot still except for Middleton for longer than 5 years at this stage. So it's always going to be a younger pot still apart from Redbreast. So yeah, not a massive fan of other younger pot stills at the moment. So I see we've got Billy Lighton and Dave McCabe joining us as well. The two blenders from Middleton. Great stuff. I hope you stick around, guys, long enough till I get to your own fancy creation, fabulous creation. I have a bottle of this sitting in the wings as well in case we go on and I decide I need to finish this off. There's about 3 measures I'd say left in this bottle. So terrible you are at making whiskey that I have to go straight through that bottle. So I might get into that one as well. But the next one we're going to move on to then, when we're finished talking about Dingle, is Teeling. Let me put this one up here. And that is a small bottle. You're not very far away from it. It is actually a small bottle compared to the Dingle before. Joe Moore, in to promote the airport, no doubt, in to promote the Loop, and to tell us the prices of all these whiskies from the Loop. Joe, what's the price of the Dingle batch 4 in the Loop, or batch 5? Let us know. You've just finished your Redbreast Listau. Very good. Moving on to Redbreast Cast Strength. The two lads from Middleton will be very impressed. Great stuff. Sheng Yang on YouTube says a simple Teeling small batch for you tonight. Great stuff. That is what we'll be having next. I don't drink enough Teeling and I want to try more of it. And this was the first one I ever tried. So we're going to crack open this little miniature and try this one. So let me see which glass we'll use for this. We'll use another Tua glass here, and we'll save our little rocks glass then for the Redbreast. Let me have a look through the comments here now and see where you're all at. So Quiveen, good man Quiveen for joining us. Power Signature. Great whiskey. Maybe the best value pot still whiskey that was out there. Sad to see it's discontinued, but slanted to you. Ed Powers Listau is amazing. It's sold out in Ohio. It is sold out. A few weeks ago, there was only about 5 bottles left in the whole state. I didn't snap them up. Somebody else did, but they're all gone. Hopefully they're coming back soon. Patrick Casey's joined in. He's got some Jameson Black Barrel. Great stuff. And let me see. Stephen McGuinness asks, he has a question for me. We'll put it up on the screen here. 3 bottles of whiskey a week during isolation. Is it a terrible problem the missus has created, or am I missed the rest of the comment there now. It must be lost in the software. But is it a terrible problem the missus has created? Look, 3 bottles of whiskey during isolation, I don't know. For some people, that's too much. For others, it's not even a Tuesday night. It's nice to have a variety. It's nice to have a selection. And I think 3 bottles on hand at any one time is a nice way to be able to dip in and have a bit of variety any time of the day or night. Whether you wake up with the cold sweats worrying about the world we're in at the moment, there's a whiskey for every occasion. Philip asks if I've tried Dunville's 12-year-old Pedro Jimenez finish. I have, and it's beautiful. I love a Pedro Jimenez finished whiskey or aged whiskey. I had the only Pedro Jimenez whiskey I have here is the last measure of the Dream Cask 20-year-old. I have 1 measure left in it, and I'm saving it maybe for next, who knows, Depends on how bad the world gets. It might be gone. It might be gone in an hour. But I have the last drop on standby anyway. So yeah, I love PX, and Dunville's are doing a great job. William says the more bottles, the better. All right, so let's crack into the Teeling. So we've talked about Dingle. If anyone's got any questions about Dingle, let me know. I am a huge fan of the town, of the people. Whenever we go back to Ireland, I'm as fast as I can heading down to Dingle. Okay, so this is Teeling small batch Irish whiskey. This was, I think, pretty much the first thing that was ever released when they opened the distillery, when they first started selling whiskey in 2015. When they built their distillery in the Liberties in Dublin. So a little bit about Teeling. Let me put that bottle back up there. I will move it even closer because it's so small. And I'll put up, let me see here. Philip is joining us. Tom is joining us. Wayne Sloan is here. This is great. So many of us here now. We are almost 100 on the stream at the moment, which is fantastic to see. Great way to spend an old Friday night or a Friday afternoon or a Friday or Saturday morning, depending on where you are in the world. So Teeling, let's be honest, the Teeling family are whiskey royalty in Ireland. We cannot begin to overstate the impact that John Teeling and his sons have had on the Irish whiskey landscape in Ireland. If you're drinking whiskey in the United States that doesn't come from a distillery, that doesn't come from a Middleton, or it's not a branded product from a Middleton or a Dingle or any of the other distilleries that are selling their own stock, there's a good chance that 60 or 70% of that stock is from one of John Teeling's distilleries. So John Teeling in the mid-1980s acquired an old potato alcohol factory, one of 5 that was being decommissioned in Ireland when the Irish government decided that they didn't anymore want to support these potato alcohol plants. Which were created to kind of give jobs in rural areas in Ireland. He bought up one of these factories, really an industrial plant, really is what it was, in the Cooley Peninsula in County Louth in Ireland. And he he started making whiskey. He started producing whiskey, predominantly grain whiskey and some malt whiskey. But John Teeling broke up what really was a monopoly on the island of Ireland. A monopoly, I say that not in a bad sense, but really just there hadn't been other players that had come into the market. The market had gone, the Irish whiskey industry had gone into a terrible nosedive over the previous 50 years or so, 60 years. And John Teeling came in and really was the 3rd distillery on the island of Ireland at that time to be in operation. And it suddenly gave a new a new approach to whiskey distillation, as opposed to what was happening in Bushmills, who were doing great things, Middleton that were doing great things. But now you had a distillery that was not focused on branded products as much as they were focused on doing products for stores, for supermarkets, third-party labels, third-party brands. And they produced incredible quantities of whiskey. And in building this distillery, it created opportunities for Irish whiskey to go further afield. It allowed new businesses to pop up who hadn't the funds to build a distillery. They could buy their third-party whiskey from John Teeling. And it went through its ups and downs. The history of the Cooley distillery is a whole episode all of its own. Remarkable story of wins and losses and almost losing everything, and then suddenly eventually selling the distillery or being acquired by Beam Suntory, global liquor brand. Amazing history over the 30 years that he ran that distillery. And it was there that the John Teeling's sons cut their teeth in kind of the whiskey world. And they then went on after the sale of Cooley. They decided they wanted to still be in the whiskey game. And they decided they wanted a branded whiskey. They hadn't a branded whiskey really until then. I mean, you had Tyrconnell and you had Connemara and you had what else did you have? Kilbeggan, of course, but they decided they wanted a branded distillery. And so the Teeling distillery was opened in 2015 in the Liberties in Dublin. And it not far from a site, believe it or not, where their ancestors had operated a distillery hundreds of years before. So the Teelings have changed the landscape in Ireland. And we should be very thankful for their presence and for the incredible contribution they've made. And I think they're only starting, because they're doing new things now that they haven't tried before, which I'm really excited to see what comes out of that. This one is the small batch. So what we have here is a blended whiskey. It's a blend of malt whiskey, so malted barley, and also grain whiskey. So it's in, I understand the ratio to be about 3 times as much grain as there is malt. So it's quite mellow, quite light on the nose. It is aged in bourbon barrels, bourbon casks, ex-bourbon casks, and then it is finished for, in this case, on this one, 6 months in rum barrels. And that rum gives it a sharpness that is unique. Now, this is bottled at 46% ABV. Now, I get the same taste, the same reaction to this as I get with every rum-finished whiskey I've ever tried, be it Irish or otherwise. There's a sharpness that hits me with a rum finish that I immediately kind of knocks me back. That now it mellows out after a minute, but the rum sharpness to me is, I think you'll either love it or you'll hate it. So a blended whiskey. It's not made in the Teeling distillery. The only whiskies that they've released that have come from the Teeling distillery so far are their single pot stills. They've got, I think they're now in regular production of their single pot still, but up until now, all of their blended whiskey, their single malts, their grains have been coming from other distilleries, some through their father's connections and father's distillery, etc. And so they acquire whiskey and they acquire aged whiskey and young whiskey, and they age it themselves, or they bottle it as kind of third party, and they release it under the Teeling name. I'm most interested in the Teeling own stock, so the Teeling single pot still, and how that's going to mature over the next few years. And they're doing really interesting barrel finishes and barrel aging experiments. They have an American distiller who has been with the family for many years. He was a distiller in Kilbeggan, and I think he worked in Cooley as well. And so they've got a really interesting approach, and they're also influenced kind of by the craft beer movement a lot. The American craft beer movement is influencing them as well. So this is a really interesting one. It's a younger whiskey. It's light on the nose, definitely quite floral. Like that grain component, I mean, 75% grain. It's going to be a little bit lighter, a little bit more floral. Almost masks the malt, but then the rum gives it that kind of a sharp little kick to it, which is quite interesting. Steve has said he's never had Teeling. Which do you recommend starting with first? Well, Steve, you'd probably start with the small batch, to be honest, and then if you can find their single pot still, which comes from their own distillery, then I'd say go on to that. It's got a blue label, and it's starting to become more and more available in the United States. So let me see what questions we might have here about Teeling. Dahi says I'll have to give him a sample of the Redbreast 27. There's some other representatives there now of the Middleton Distillery on the chat there, Dahi, who'll be in a much better position to be giving you samples of Redbreast 27. You leave me to my last few samples in that bottle. I've gone through it far too fast. Sean Scully is visiting, or is logged in from Portland, Oregon. He asks if I got to visit any of the distilleries in Ireland when I was visiting a couple of months back. I did, of course, Sean. I went to lovely Clonakilty down in West Cork. I went to Dingle. I went to, where else did I go? I went to Waterford Distillery. We're going to talk a lot about Waterford Distillery in the next month. I've got some of Waterford Distillery's whiskey here in California, believe it or not. I think it's the only American bottling, and the only bottle that's in America. I've got a few sample bottles that I'm going to take out and talk about. But yeah, Sean, I toured quite a bit in Ireland. There's never enough time to do as many things as you want to do, and you have great plans when you land and you first see the welcome home, welcome to Dublin sign in the airport. You think, great, I'm going to hit 20 distilleries. And then 3 distilleries later, you're in a shambles, you're in bits. And 2 weeks of your life has been lost to trying to get around and sample all these whiskies and meet everyone. So yeah, more on the horizon. JP says either I've got a very big head or that's a very miniature bottle. Well, I think both are true, JP. I have a big head and I have a very small bottle, but here's a bigger bottle. This is for the Father Ted fans in the audience. They'll know the whole reference to are the cows small or just far away? These cows are small. Ed says that Waterford is really exciting. It is. There's really interesting things coming out of Waterford. So the single malts that are coming out of Waterford, we're going to try those. I'm going to taste those over the next few weeks. So who's had Teeling? Let me see. Paul says Teeling single pot still is over $80 in California. Is it worth it? You'd rather have 2 Redbreast 12-year-olds. Yeah, well, I think you should, what you should do is you should order Teeling single pot still in a bar when it's open next. The next time we can get to a bar, if these things ever exist again, hopefully they do, order yourself a measure of it in your local bar if it has it, and then decide if you want to spend and splurge for the bottle. Hard to beat 2 Redbreast 12-year-olds now, to be fair. And I'm not just saying that because the very makers of the stuff are here on the line, but hard to beat. If you can get 2 Redbreast 12-year-olds for $80, you're doing very well. All right, what else have we got? MP says, stick with the Redbreast 12-year-olds, Paul. There's your answer. Cassandra reckons that I have to make multiple trips to Ireland to get all the distilleries in. I think that when all this madness is over, we should charter a flight and we should all head over to Ireland and hit up all 31 distilleries, whether they're selling whiskey or not. We're going to visit them all. I don't know how long it'll take, but we'll head over there and we'll do the tour to beat all tours, and we'll hit up all of our whiskey contacts and tell them to open the doors and roll out the red carpet, and then we'll truly experience what Ireland has to offer on the whiskey side of things. So yeah, hopefully things get back to normal pretty soon. William says he is a fan of the Teeling Renaissance 18-year-old. I've never tried it. Last time I remember speaking to somebody recently about the Teeling range, and they told me that they were trying to collect all of the Teeling whiskies, and they said they stopped at 67 different expressions. That's an enormous number of whiskies for them to have released, and I have no way to keep track of them. I think that seems like the sum total of all of the different expressions that come out of Midleton would be something around the 60 or 70 mark as well. So for all of that to come out under one brand name is incredible. So no, I've not tried it, and I get confused with all the Teeling expressions. I think I have to just try more, get more educated on them, so that I can give some kind of feedback. Here we have it officially now. Billy Lighton in Midleton says we'd all be very welcomed. He's going to open the doors in Midleton. He's going to let us into the special warehouses. And he's going to use his blender's dog to put out some samples from 30-year-old Madeira casks for us, aren't you, Billy? And then we'll never leave. You'll have to get the guards to get us out. We'll never want to leave that. A Stories and Sips flight, says Peter. Yeah, we'll get Stories and Sips tour glasses. We'll get Stories and Sips chartered flight, and we'll get Stories and Sips sweatshirts. And then when we get there, we'll buy a Stories and Sips barrel. This seems like a fantastic branding opportunity altogether. All right, so Casey has just joined us from California. He asks if that was the Dingle single malt batch 4 just a minute ago. It was. There it is. I think you have that, do you, Casey? I think I remember you posting something about that. Tim asks me, what's my favorite TV show from Ireland? That's a great one. Mel, what do you think? I'm asking Mrs. Stories and Sips what I like. We're very partial to Derry Girls, all right, over the last year or two. It'll be hard to beat Father Ted for a bit of comedy. Or what else? Tommy Tiernan, a comedian, yeah. Father Ted would be hard to beat. Try and find Father Ted if you can on Netflix. Derry Girls, yeah. Yeah, Derry Girls as well. That'll be a newer edition, yeah. Wayne says to Billy that he'll regret that invite. He will when 87 of us roll in the door looking for samples of the barrel. Bosco. Paul Kennedy says Bosco is his favorite. Connor says Fair City. So for all the Americans out there, Fair City is the equivalent of your daytime soaps, but with acting that's about 10% as good. And it's set in a fictional town in Dublin. And it is, I think it goes out 7 nights a week, or it was up to a few weeks ago. And it is the most god-awful show you'll ever see in your life. But yeah, it gets people tuning in. And if you love it, sure, look, don't pay attention to me. Richard said Father Ted was hilarious. Father Ted is the right answer, apparently. All right. So we're moving on now to the whiskey we might take our time on. We've no homes to go to because we're in our homes. There's nowhere else for us to go. We're in our homes. They can't send us away. So we'll sip on this and we'll take our time. And if Billy or Dave, the gentleman behind this whiskey, would like to say anything about it, you're free to jump in any time and give a comment. You're also free to share the screen. I know you're too shy for that, I'd say, but you'd be more than welcome anytime. I'd click a link and I'd send you a link and you could jump on if you wanted to talk about it, but we might make that happen another time. But feel free to jump in. So, yeah, this is the whiskey that will ruin your life, because once you start drinking Redbreast, you'll realize that everything in life looks different and is suddenly better, but suddenly all your money is tied up in different expressions of Redbreast, and your clothes get older and not replaced because you're spending all your money on more expensive versions of Redbreast when they come out, for fear that you don't get to try what everybody is talking about. Paul Kennedy says he'll have to get Dermot Morgan's brother to join us some night. Now, Paul, that's an offer we're not going to turn down. Dermot Morgan was the actor who sadly passed away a few days after finishing the last series of Father Ted. He was the character. He played the character Father Ted. Yeah, please, we'd be delighted to have him join us. Let me see. Joe is going to... Richard is going to match me on that Redbreast 12. So what was great to see earlier today on the Facebook page on Stories and Sips, and in our incredibly fast-growing community, Irish Whiskey Fans of America, our group is growing like gangbusters. It's incredible to see. We're growing now at a rate of about 500 new people a week, which is incredible. We've added 2,000 people in the past month to our Facebook group. Here's what happens when I share what we're going to sip on a Friday night. You all come out and you share with me your pictures of those same bottles, and you bring them with you tonight. And there's so many of you here in the comments who are sharing with me that you've bought these bottles or you've brought these bottles to the tasting, which is fantastic. Some of you even sent me pictures beforehand. James in Ireland, you sent me a picture. Brian, you sent me a picture. Brian in Cincinnati. You guys have these whiskeys, which is fantastic to see. And if that's what this does, is it makes us all drink the same whiskey or go out and find new whiskeys because we all get to talk about them together, even better. That's brilliant. So this is the Redbreast 12 is the next one. Special glass for that. I have a Redbreast branded glass, but it's Sonny Malloy's Redbreast. Sonny Malloy is the bar in Galway that released their own single cask Redbreast. A 16-year-old, was it? Or a 19-year-old? Can't remember. 16, I think. This one will deserve a special pour there now. We'll be here for a while. So sit on in, get comfortable in your chair there now for the next 8 or 9 hours, because we're not going anywhere until either this is finished or the Redbreast 27 is finished. Who knows? If the Redbreast 27 was human, Cassandra would marry it. Just throwing that out there. All right, so that's something there now for the lads to think about. Cassandra would marry the 27-year-old Redbreast. Okay, so Redbreast 12-year-old is the best-selling single pot still whiskey in the world, the most awarded single pot still whiskey in the world. And for those of you joining us from the United States who are still getting to know the different whiskeys and the styles, Redbreast is what's known as a single pot still. And a single pot still does not mean that it is distilled in one single still. Rather, the word single refers to the fact that it is produced at one single distillery. The term single pot still whiskey is an older term. It's been called everything from pure pot still to pot still. Now it's commonly referred to as single pot still when it's made in the one distillery. It basically means that what we have here is a whiskey that is made from a mixture of malted and unmalted barley. So single malt, we started off with a single malt from Dingle. The single malt from Dingle is just malted barley, and malted barley that is distilled 3 times. The beer is distilled 3 times and is aged in a mixture of barrels. With pot still whiskey, what you have is the mixture of malted and unmalted barley. That wash is going through the distillation 3 times as well in the case of Redbreast in triple distillation, and is then aged for a minimum of 12 years in a combination of ex-bourbon and ex-Oloroso sherry casks. So whenever we see a age statement on a bottle, so you see here number 12, there was no age on the other whiskies that we tried so far tonight. By law, that denotes the youngest whiskey that's in the bottle. So there may be as old as a 15-year-old whiskey in this bottle, but by law, we must declare what is the youngest component in there. So that's spent 12 years minimum, aging in a mixture of bourbon and ex-Oloroso sherry barrels. Julie said she gave her friends Redbreast 12 and they're hooked forever. First time I tried Redbreast 12, I was too young for it. My palate wasn't refined enough or even capable of appreciating it. And I started a little bit, I started with Jameson Black Barrel, loved Jameson Black Barrel. And then one day ran out of Jameson Black Barrel and discovered that somebody had given me a bottle of Redbreast 12 years before. It was an old label, and I had tried it once and didn't like it, and I'd left it sitting on the shelf. And I popped open the Redbreast and I tried a little bit of it. And it was like fireworks went off in my mouth. I suddenly realized what all the fuss was about, and my palate was finally ready for it. And once I tried Redbreast that time, the consumption of Black Barrel went down and the consumption of Redbreast went way up, to the point where now it's the sipper, like Redbreast 12 and 15 and 21, of a special occasion, and even the 27, if I can get my hands on them, they're what I'm drinking. So Redbreast 12 is a really special whiskey. So what's different about this than a blended whiskey? Well, look, there's so much different in terms of the production. I mentioned blended whiskey is, well, a single malt is made with malted barley alone. A blended whiskey could be made with a combination of single pot still and a grain whiskey, or single malt and a grain whiskey. Here we have just malted and unmalted barley, triple distilled, aged in a mixture of Oloroso, ex-Oloroso and ex-bourbon barrels. This Redbreast can be traced back to the late 1800s, early 1900s. W&A Gilby was a wine merchants, a London wine merchants. They had offices in Dublin, and they were used to importing port, sherry, wine, Madeira, Marsala, all kinds of fortified wines from continental Europe to Ireland, and they would have brought them in barrels. And when they were finished selling these off in bottles to bars, or when when the barrels were empty, they had this remarkable idea to take these former port and sherry and Madeira barrels, etc., that they had over the bridge from their headquarters in Dublin, over the bridge to the old Jameson Bow Street distillery, where the Bow Street distillery would have filled up these barrels with pot still whiskey. Gilby's would have brought back these barrels a mile across the bridge, stored them in their cellars underneath the streets of Dublin, and they would have aged the whiskey themselves. In aging the whiskey themselves in these different types of barrels, they were now creating an entirely new whiskey, because they were imparting a flavor profile from these barrels that would have historically not been familiar. And this combination of the single pot still from Jameson and the ex-port, the ex-sherry, the ex-wine finishes that were being put on their whiskies was a remarkable new introduction of whiskies to Ireland. And when originally, I mean, we can date the name Redbreast back to about 1912, as far as I know. I'll stand corrected on that. Dave or Billy will correct me, but before it was known as Redbreast, the name Castle Liqueur was out there, similar shaped bottle. This is kind of the old shaped bottle that's been around for quite a while. Gilby's were making Redbreast right up until the 1980s, and they were using stock from the Bow Street distillery in Dublin until that stock, of course, ran out when all distilling ceased in Dublin and moved down to Middleton and County Cork. And then Gilby's didn't produce Redbreast anymore. They kind of ran into some difficulties, and then Irish Distillers, the parent company that operates the Middleton distillery, acquired the brand and then brought Redbreast 12 back into the market in the 1990s. For I think 10 or 15 years, Billy or Dave will know better, their Redbreast 12 was the only Redbreast that was on the market. And then there was a special release, a 15-year-old was released to celebrate the 50th anniversary of their French wine shop and friend of the brand, friend of Irish whiskey, and a distributor of pot still whiskey in France, La Maison du Whiskey. And they released a 15-year-old expression to celebrate that, and it was received so well that it became a permanent part of the lineup. Billy just said that 1912 is correct. The first advert appeared for Redbreast in 1912. So the 15-year-old came along after the 12, and then we had the 21-year-old. Maybe the cask strength came before the 21-year-old, but 21-year-old cask strength, and the Lastau, and now the 27-year-old. So a remarkable range of whiskies. It was known historically as the priest's tipple. Why was it the priest's tipple? Because back in the early 1900s, a whiskey like this would have been expensive. It would have been maybe on the top shelf of the bar, and the only people some of the only people who could afford to order from the top shelf were the priests, because we were giving them our money during the week, and then they were able to spend it on the weekend. And when the locals saw the priests drinking it, they knew it must be good, because the priests had a great quality of life back in the day and were well taken care of. And so if a priest drank something, it must have been good. So Billy says 1912 is correct. Let me see. What else do we need to know about Redbreast? Well, we haven't even nosed it or tasted it yet. I've been too busy talking. So we hear the phrase a lot, Billy and Dave, I've heard you share it, the Christmas cake whiskey. Growing up in Ireland, we made Christmas cake with dried fruits, and we would have poured sherry all over the cake, and we were told it was to preserve it. Good story. But in any case, our Christmas cakes were covered in sherry. And to be fair, they did last for 40 years once you poured sherry on them. But immediately when I nose Redbreast, I'm transported back to my mother making Christmas cake on a Christmas Eve with raisins and suet and currants and the bottle of sherry there beside her. It would have been like a Tio Pepe sherry maybe back in the day, or maybe Sandyman sherry. But I'm transported back. So there's that nutty sweetness that comes on the nose. And then a single pot still whiskey is different in kind of mouthfeel than you find with a single malt or a blend. Certainly single pot still, because you've had malted barley and unmalted barley both reacting differently to the yeast and to the fermentation, and both going through the distillation. That combination, that mixture going through the distillation creates a different flavor profile, a different consistency, a different viscosity, and a different mouthfeel. So there's a typical creaminess or a spiciness that would be associated with a single pot still whiskey. So I'm going to stop talking now and drink this. Love the spice on the mouth, all the way to the back of the mouth, the spice with a Redbreast 12-year-old. The dark stone fruits, and to me, I always get from any of the Redbreasts, and maybe it's just my palate, I'm always getting this candied apricot. It blows me away on the 21-year-old, but it's there, it's present. But there's a nuttiness, there's a sweetness, and there's that creamy, spicy mouthfeel that's so unique to single pot still. This is it's a whiskey drinker's drink for my money. It is a absolute joy to sip on neat. You notice that in all these tastings or sessions that we've had, I've never added a drop of water, and I've never found the need to add water to any of the whiskeys coming out of Midleton. But that's not to say that you can't add water, of course. It's all about how you like to drink it. A big fan of people drinking whiskey any way that they want. We've got some great conversations I see happening in the comments here between the lads in Midleton and the rest of you. So yeah, feel free to ask each other questions as well as me. That's the great thing about this software here. JJ asks, Billy, could you disclose if there would be any Madeira used in the distillery with a Redbreast or a Powers brand? Because I believe one of you has shared before that there is Madeira stock. Where's that going to appear, I wonder? So Casey asks if I like to drink sherry on its own. He personally thinks it's sort of foul, reminds him of a musty barn. However, its casks do make whiskies more delicious. I don't like to drink sherry on its own at all. My grandmother, it was, I mean, you talk about drinks like sherry and port, and historically these would have been, of course, even whiskey. Sherry and port was the old lady's drink, and then whiskey was the old man's drink. Of course, all that's changed now. But I can remember my grandmother sitting on the couch and us opening up the good cabinet and taking out the Waterford crystal sherry glass. Never forget it. And top of the cabinet, the glasses, bottom of the cabinet, port and the sherry. Pull out the sherry for her. She'd always have a little pre-dinner drink, little glass of sherry before dinner. That was her little sip. For me, it's too overpowering as a drink on its own. I love its influence on the wood, and I love its influence on the malted barley and the unmalted barley. But it's not for me. But Barton has a good point. We need to drink sherry because we need the barrels. Well, the barrels that we get, that most Irish whiskey that is aged in Oloroso sherry barrels is aged in, hasn't, to the best of my knowledge, hasn't held whiskey that or sherry that was aged for a long period of time, and it's seasoned. Most of the barrels are seasoned. Is it for 2 or 3 years? Dave and Billy would of course know the answer to that. But I know they're sherry seasoned. So even if so, these are new barrels that are then seasoned with the sherry, and then they are sent to Midleton once the seasoning is finished. Johnny says discovered Redbreast on his way to Italy. Picked up a bottle at the airport because you feared he might not be able to get it there. Yeah, when you find something good, you have to hold on to it. You can't. You have to snap it up for fear that it might not be somewhere else. I've lost track of the number of times I've sneaked a miniature bottle of Redbreast with me into places that shouldn't have had miniature bottles of anything, for fear that they wouldn't have the drink I wanted. Concerts, events, there'd always be a little miniature bottle being pulled out of the back pocket. And there's no harm at all. So Richard says he's not heard of Jameson Black Barrel, and you've looked it up on Amazon, and the tasting notes definitely sound like something you would enjoy, so you have to buy a barrel. So Richard, I mentioned Black Barrel was the whiskey that got me into Irish whiskey. For many Americans that I meet, the whiskey that got them into Irish whiskey is Jameson Original in the green bottle, not too dissimilar to the color of this. And Jameson, the blended product, is a fantastic whiskey to drink, fantastic whiskey to sip. I know many of our American friends are very fond of drinking it rather quickly, less than 2 seconds in their mouth and it's gone. But for those who like Jameson Original and want to try something different and want to move up the category a little bit, Jameson Black Barrel is a great next step, because Jameson Original is a blend of two different types of whiskey. It's a blend of single pot still whiskey, and it's blended with grain, which is a corn or a maize that comes from south of France or north of Spain. And with Jameson Black Barrel, you don't have the corn component, you don't have the grain, the maize component. Instead, you've got single pot still that has been distilled through the pot stills, and you've got malted and unmalted barley wash that's gone through the column stills, the tall stills that would typically distill the grain, the corn, the maize. So when those two are blended together, you get a remarkably unique drink, a sweet drink, but the sweetness doesn't come from corn. It comes from this style of distillation of the malted and the unmalted barley. That's a fact that was shared with me by Mr. Dave McCabe, who's here on the line, who shared that with me in Boston at the launch of the small batch Redbreasts, and I hadn't known that, but it's a great next step. So for me, I'd go Jameson Original, Jameson Black Barrel, and then Redbreast 12 if you're trying to move up the flavor profiles there. Let me see here. There was Dave says that sherry barrels, they're seasoned for 2 years minimum with Oloroso sherry. And there was a note from Billy as well. Let me see. Okay, so I know there's a few questions going into Billy and Dave on the comments, and Billy and Dave, you're very generous to be answering those comments. Thank you so much. Daniel says, Barry, my grandparents all love sherries too, like your own. Most sherry now produced for sherry vinegar and pretty much just for whiskey casks. It'll be fascinating to see if sherry and other fortified wines will make a comeback. It'd be great to see. I did hear a distiller mention recently that, of course, there's no need for us to be using sherry any longer to age our whiskies, because historically it would have been what was available, and it's what we would have had an abundance of sherry casks left over, and so we would have used those for maturation. But today there isn't that same demand, yet we still use sherry casks when we could be using ex-bourbon or other types. So I think we'll see a lot of different maturation approaches happening with wood over the next few years from the smaller distilleries that are popping up as well. So Stephen says that one of his favorite whiskies of all time is Redbreast 21. Without a doubt, one of the best whiskies the world has seen, not just Ireland. I don't think there's a better 21-year-old. Yeah, it's absolutely hard to beat it. Incredible whiskey. It's for a special occasion though, Stephen, like a Tuesday around 10 a.m. So Paul says the Redbreast 12 is an astonishing bottle of whiskey, and the 12 cask strength will blow the mind of anyone who has had the 12. Yeah, so let's talk about that a little bit. This is the baby of the range. Well, one of the babies. There's a Listau edition, which is a little bit younger, doesn't have an age statement on it. But there is a cask strength version of the 12-year-old. So this is bottled at 40%. And then there's a cask strength version. And Mel, could you pass me the box in the cupboard of the cask strength Redbreast in the right-hand corner, please? There's a Redbreast cask strength version. I picked up a bottle of it here in California last week. Thanks, Mel. And this is, we pulled up to the screen, cask strength edition. This was the batch 114, and this has an ABV of 58.2. So if you like your whiskies high in alcohol content and you want to control the flavor profile by adding water to taste, then maybe the cask strength version would be the one for you. So yeah, cask strength is a remarkable whiskey, and for not much difference in the price point, depending on where you can get it. But yeah, this incidentally is quite a rare cask strength, I've been told, because it was released in 2014 pretty much exclusively for the US and American markets, and the Irish are all clamoring to get it. Well, you're not getting my bottle. It's going to stay with me over here. But yeah, the cask strength is worth looking out for. And then we were lucky enough to have the release of other cask strength whiskies from Redbreast. I'm going to send you into the whiskey cupboard again, please, for the small batch, the purple bag. The last year, Billy and Dave came over to launch in Boston and in California. Small batch Redbreast, 14-year-old cask strength in this lovely little sack. And this one, there's 4 different batches, batch A to D. This one's batch D, which happens to be my favorite, and I think that's got the most sherry influence in it, if I'm correct. But this is 58.9%. So if you like high alcohol proof whiskies and you love Redbreast, try and find these. They were sold out pretty quickly, and maybe the most affordable Redbreast, or the greatest value Redbreast I've ever seen. A 14-year-old cask strength Redbreast for less than $100, which is incredible for those who love their Redbreast. Richard says that he is torn between buying the Jameson Black Barrel or the Redbreast 12. Well, Richard, you could start with one and then move up to the other. So try your Jameson Black Barrel and then learn a little bit about that, kind of familiarize yourself with it, and then you can move on to the Redbreast 12 once you've had a chance. Richard is drinking the small batch A right now, which is great to hear. Billy says that the small batch was a great project. Billy, there was lines out the door for this small batch, and it is a truly great series. Like, I've got all my bottles, you'll see, are open because there's no point in keeping them. But I'll crack this open again now this week. It was actually squirreled away in a bag in the cupboard. I forgot all about it until this week. The batch D is incredible, and I loved hearing about the development of this project, which is really for kind of a reward for the American support of Redbreast over the past few years. Richard says that he flew from Dallas to Boston for the release of the small batch and then flew to San Francisco for their release. The batch D was and still is the hardest to get hold of. Now, Billy and Dave, look at that for dedication. People flying across the country twice to get hold of the whiskey. Well, Richard, I hope you drank it, or you're going to drink it with all that flying around. So let me see. Tim says that his bottle of Bushmills 21 shows up Tuesday, just in time for a Tuesday tipple. Yes, we're going to be doing Tuesday tipple on Tuesday. Myself and Omar Fitzel from www.thatsdramgood.com are going to be going live in Ireland pretty early, Irish time, 8 p.m. Irish time, because I know a lot of Irish are up now watching this at all hours of the night. There's 80 of you here. We're going to be tasting, we're not doing Bushmills on Tuesday, but if you want to open your 21, by all means do it. I know that we're going to probably sample this on the night, if there's any left by Tuesday. I'll be drinking Tullamore Dew 14-year-old, and actually Teeling Singles small batch will be coming back again. But great, that Bushmills 21 is Mrs. Stories and Sips' #1 whiskey in the world, her favorite whiskey. And I think it's my favorite single malt of all time. Absolutely stunning. Joe Moore just finished his glass of cask strength. He's moving on to the Redbreast 21. That's it, Joe. That's the way to do it. Joe is our man on the ground in the airport, comes in here every week and gives us great prices, great deals. Joe's the man to hit up when the airports open up again. Let me see here. What else have we got? Other questions? Let me see. Jeff says that we never saw a small batch in the Midwest. No, the biggest markets for Redbreast over the past few years have been on the East and West Coast. I know that Ohio, which I've been delighted to participate in its growth in Ohio, has seen a massive growth in sales, double-digit growth, maybe one of the biggest percentage growths over the past year has happened in the Midwest, in Ohio and in Pennsylvania. So I think maybe we'll see some things for the Midwest. Billy and Dave, we'd love to see them. So hopefully, well, there's things that people get in different places, Jeff. I know that in the Midwest we get hold of some things that, like, for example, the entire Redbreast range, the core range is available in Ohio as an example, and it's not available in lots of parts of the US. Okay, so Greg Lematrice is moving on from Tully 12-year-old to Powers 3 Swallow. Great move there, Powers 3 Swallow. Fantastic value whiskey altogether. And MP says that the massive growth in sales at his house for Redbreast. So I love the history of Redbreast, and I love the story of whiskey bonding and how you had these old spirit merchants of old, the likes of the Gilbeys and Mitchell and Son, and hundreds around the country, grocers and publicans and hoteliers and licensed bonders who basically promised the government through this bond, by paying for a license. It was a promise to the government that they would pay the tax due on the whiskey when it was sold to the consumer. So this whiskey bonding was in place for many, many years, until the distilleries took back control for the most part. In all cases now, they've taken back control of the bottling and overseeing the bottling and the aging of their whiskies. But it wasn't until the late 1960s, early 1970s, that Dublin started bottling whiskey in Jameson, for example. I know in Cork they bottled their whiskey a lot earlier, in Cork Distilleries Company, but the whiskey bonders have lent a fantastic kind of a veneer and another coating of color and complexity to the story and the history of whiskey. And we're seeing some whiskey bonders pop up now, and we'll be drinking some whiskey on happy hour from whiskey bonders and whiskey bottlers and whiskey merchants over the coming weeks. Some of you are here on the line, which is great. Barton says that, okay, so here's something we might do: a group trip for Whiskey Live in November. It'd be fantastic. If the gates are open to the country, the doors are open, they won't be able to stop us. We'll arrive there with our empty suitcases and our checkbooks and our tickets for Whiskey Live, and we'll do some damage. That'll be a great old time, all right, for sure. Melinda's in as well. Mrs. Stories and Sips. Let me see. Yeah, okay, so this is a good one from Greg. There's a Redbreast mini 3-bottle pack that has Listowel along with Redbreast 12 and Redbreast 15. It's a fantastic little pack, a little travel pack, and a great way to try all 3 of those expressions. I know when I was in Boston last year with Billy and Dave, and I asked you, Billy, what your favorite Redbreast expression was, and you told me it was the Listowel, which is the collaboration with Bodegas Listowel in Jerez in Spain. And not many people get to see, unfortunately, Listowel around the United States. It's not as widely available as the 12 or the 15. So if you find these little 3-packs, they're certainly widely available in Ohio. And Greg, you'd be delighted to hear that there are more and more of them coming into Ohio in the next few weeks, because we're going to do a Redbreast tasting in the next few weeks online. For those of you who are in Ohio and are not yet aware, I'm going to be doing a Jameson tasting on Thursday. We already have 100 people signed up. We're not going to do it like in this format. We're going to actually have a Zoom call where we're all going to see each other's faces. I'll be muting all the microphones because it'll be chaos, but you'll all be able to see each other. We'll be able to ask questions. I'll be able to open up microphones one by one. We'll be able to talk about the whiskeys, and I'll be tasting 4 different Jameson products that are widely available in the United States. Jameson Black Barrel, Jameson Cold Brew, which is the new coffee-infused whiskey. I'll be doing Jameson Caskmate Stout Edition, and then also Jameson 18-year-old. So 4 great whiskies from the Jameson lineup beyond the original Jameson. So we won't even be tasting the original Jameson. Then, and a week later or 10 days later, I'll be doing a Redbreast tasting. I'll be putting the details up on that. I hope to do as much of the core range as possible in that tasting. So that'll be another fun event. So stay tuned to that. So keep an eye on Stories and Sips. And if you haven't joined the Facebook group, let me put the details in here. How do we put the details up here? It's called Irish Whiskey Fans of America. And you can do a search on Facebook. Type around the microphone. Irish Whiskey Fans of America. Okay. So do a search for, oh, wrong one. Hide that one. Irish Whiskey Fans of America. Do a search on Facebook and join. Like I said, 500 people a week are joining it. We're having an amazing conversation. No selling, no trading. It's all great conversation, discussing the whiskeys, talking about where people have found great whiskeys, what their favorites are, asking questions. A really generous community is building up in there, and it's one that I want to grow and grow and grow. And there's no reason why it can't be the biggest Facebook group for Irish whiskey in the world, which would be remarkable. And so I'm moderating that daily. I'm spending actually 2 hours a day in that group to make sure that the content is on point, that nobody's spamming, that nobody's in there blasting memes out there. It's genuine conversation. And there's what I love about it is that it is a no judgment zone. Whether you drink Redbreast 27 or you drink proper 12, if you enjoy Irish whiskey, that's the place to come. We all talk about it. We share what we like, what we don't like. And I've taken great pleasure in watching you all share your favorite whiskies and helping the younger whiskey drinkers to understand why they might like something or why they might prefer one over the other. And a great moment happened during the week where we saw a proper 12 drinker go out and purchase a bottle of Paddy. And I thought, that's fantastic. So somebody came in through the proper 12 channel and they became aware of Irish whiskey through a certain mixed martial arts fighter. And now they've fallen in love with Irish whiskey. So it's a great place for us to help, talk, chat, collaborate, communicate, and just help each other out. At the end of the day, isn't that what whiskey's all about? And there is a lot of Irish in there too. Connor reminded me, we shouldn't be misled by the name. Of course, it started in America by me. It is primarily aimed at an American audience. It's going to have American events that are happening there. I know in Ireland you're well taken care of with Facebook groups and things like that. But Irish are welcome to join. Jump in there, add to the conversation, be additive, contribute to it, and it's going to make for a much richer place for us all to hang out. Let me see what else. Oh, great. So Julie has Bushmills 21 in the glass right now. Jealous, Julie. We almost pulled the trigger on ordering a bottle of Bushmills 21 recently. I'm going to have to do that. Let me see. Molly is going to get your bottle of cold brew, so you'll grab one, and that's where you got the one you got me for Christmas. This is going to be what's great about this tasting we're doing on Thursday is that so many of you have shared that you've gone out and bought all the 4 bottles. So it's the first tasting where the whiskeys aren't supplied. You're going and you're getting them, and you're coming to the table saying, "I've got these whiskeys," and we're going to have a great night walking through it. Thanks, MP, for that. I think the beauty of this group that's forming is that we're curating it. We're not letting it just blow up into a sales pitch or into spamming or just any personal attacks. People are out. We've kicked people out. There's no room for politics or personal attacks. It's just for the love of Ireland, the love of Irish whiskey, the love of a good story, the love of a drop of Redbreast. Billy and Dave in Middleton, you'd be delighted to hear that the most popular Redbreast, or whiskey by far, or the most sought after, is Redbreast 12 in there. And if you're not in the group yet, feel free to join in as well. Greg asking a question about Bushmills 10 and 16. Yeah, they're well worth trying as well. What's great about Bushmills is that they've had such consistency on one hand with having pretty much the same lineup for many years, but then on the other hand, it's frustrating to know that they have so much good whiskey behind their doors that they're not releasing. And I'd love to get hold of some older stock, which I know sometimes makes its way to things like Teeling or some JJ Corrie releases, but I'd love to see a Bushmills brand with an older, with some older age whiskey on it. Patrick says, I'm not judgmental until somebody posts a Redbreast 27-year-old and Coke in a highball. Patrick, their money, their whiskey. I will not be judgmental, and I'm going to have to hold myself back when I see it. But you have my word. Call me out if you see any judgment on that page by me. I don't care what you do with your Redbreast 27. But I suppose it would make it last longer, wouldn't it, if you added Coke to it? you'd have more in your glass. I won't be putting any Coke into that now. But if you want to do that, and you want to take your $500 and add Coke to it, be my guest. I look forward to the other members' comments, though. That's where the real crack would be. Wayne says, it's been a great live video, great platform for like minds enjoying Irish whiskey. Thanks, Wayne. Great to have you here, and really enjoying everybody participating. What other questions does anybody have about Redbreast? Maybe I should move on to the old Redbreast 27 in a minute, seeing as we're still here. What are comments that we have here? Brian sampled the Bushmills Red Bush not long ago, and it was very good, pleasantly surprised. Yeah, I actually like the Red Bush when I tried it too. And then let me see. Billy said that he's with me on Bushmills. He spent many good years there. So yeah, so many of you might know that Billy started up in Northern Ireland, working in the Northern Irish distilleries, Coleraine, I believe, and Bushmills before moving down to Middleton. And you probably had your hand somewhere along the line in the Bushmills 21, Billy, that has found its way onto the shelves, and now you've got your hand in the Redbreast 21. So you have tentacles into all the distilleries somehow. So let me see, what are questions? Richard has a question: is Gilbey's gin in any way related? Yeah, it's the same company, to the best of my knowledge. Gilbey's, the spirit company. To the best of my knowledge, Gilbey's gin is from Gilbey's, that have been around for 150 odd years now at this stage. Jeff asks the question that gets asked every time Billy shows up: what's the next dream cask? So my understanding, and Billy has confirmed this when I've asked, is that there is a dream cask release scheduled every year for the next few years, which we should all look forward to, and hope we can get our hands on it, because the dream cask is a remarkable single cask or selection of a few casks that are released once a year, limited number of bottles, 500 milliliter bottles. It has been historically 900 bottles or so released every year, very sought after. And it's great to, when you do get hold of one, to pop open the cork and post a picture of it on Facebook groups, and everybody starts screaming, why are you opening that? It's going to be worth so much more money in 2 years' time. Well, it's worth more in my belly when I drink it. So I'm hoping that we get more dream casks out. Another dream cask this year would be great to see. Quiveen says he'd love to see Bushmills doing some of the innovative things that others are doing. Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. So Barton says that I should post when I'm ready to schedule the Whiskey Live trip with other distillery visits. So we might as well talk a little bit about that. So when I started Stories and Sips back in 2018, it was as a result of doing whiskey tastings for as fundraisers for cancer research in Ohio. And I had no knowledge of whiskey before I started it. And I'd argue my knowledge is still very limited compared to the minds that are on this call even. But I started learning about whiskey through these fundraisers. I even met my wife at a fundraiser. So a remarkable success story, these fundraisers. But I decided that an easy way to raise money for cancer research would be to offer people Irish whiskey and then ask them for $50 and then give the $50 to cancer research, and I'd pay for the whiskey. And so that's what happened. And I got really interested in the stories of the whiskeys, and I grew up 12 miles from the Middleton distillery. But my goal then, when I started doing these, once these fundraisers became more frequent, I thought, we need to bring people to Ireland, and we need to get these people who come to the tastings who are so interested in Ireland and Irish whiskey. We need to bring them to the distilleries to show them where it came from. And so we've done it. We've brought people. I've brought 11 people over to Ireland. We've had a great old time to try and test this out. So Stories and Sips is evolving and will evolve, current global market conditions permitting, into stories, sips, and trips. And the idea being that we'll get our stories through my podcasts and through things like this. We'll also get the sips here on our live stream. We'll get them in our virtual tastings. We'll get them in our in-person tastings. And then the trips, of course, will be stories and sips heading to Ireland, getting a group together. Those of us who enjoy the banter, enjoy the crack, enjoy maybe exploring Irish whiskey a little bit further. We'll talk to the likes of Billy and Dave, who might be kind enough to show us something in the Middleton distillery, and we'll talk to others in different parts of the country and have a real Irish whiskey experience. So if that's something we can pull off in 2020, I'm all about it. So Barton, stay tuned. If the world changes back to the way it should be, and fingers crossed it does, we'll be going to Ireland sooner rather than later. Quiveen says, I'm being very quotable this evening. Is that due to this one here? It's worth more in my belly when I drink it. Barry Chandler. It is, though. What's the point in gathering dust? How many people post pictures on Instagram of closed bottles? That's brilliant. But I could just take a closed bottle picture from a website. Those are the pictures we want. Look, open. It doesn't matter if it's proper 12 or Redbreast 27. Drink the whiskey. Drink the whiskey. Look, here it is officially. Blenders don't make whiskey to sit on a shelf. That's from the man who gave us this. And if you're not going to pay attention to me, at least pay attention to Billy Lighton and Dave McCabe down there in Middleton doing the Lord's work, giving us these fantastic whiskies. All right, so I'm going to finish this Redbreast 12 now, and I'm going to move on to the 27. Never planned on going on to the 27-year-old, but look, we're here now. Casey says the whole religious divide between whiskey is kind of just an American thing anyway. Nobody in Ireland cares about it. That's true. I often have people ask me, what's a Protestant whiskey and what's a Catholic whiskey? We don't even think about that in Ireland. It's not even a conversation for us. We don't even bother our time with it. There's no such thing. There's only whiskey, Irish whiskey, period. And I think that deserves more focus. But it's true. I hear it a lot in America, but I don't hear it all in Ireland. But whiskey welcomes everybody, which is the good news. Richard has a great point. So much whiskey, so little time. I know. We're only an hour and a half in here, and we're only into our third whiskey. Okay, so now we're going to go on to clean that out. Get a drop of water. All right, we'll put this up here because it's just that good. Redbreast 27. So MP is a great point. This is a wise man. We should pay attention to him. That's why you buy 2 bottles, Barry. Some buy Picassos. I buy bottles. And you can always drink the bottles later. You can only stare at the Picassos. That's it. That's it. Pour a drop in here. William says he's only enough of the 27 to hold on to until Tuesday. William, I'm with you. I mean, what's that? A sixth of a bottle? I suppose I won't drink a sixth. Yeah, I need some for Tuesday. I want you all to join me again on Tuesday. Tuesday afternoon, American time, Tuesday evening, Irish time. Oh, look at the color of that. It'll make you weep. Oh, it's incredible. Hermit is going back into his Teeling distillery. He got it in July of last year and said it was the last of its kind. Their distillery edition now is different. He's maybe got 2 more of theirs from that bottle. 2 more pours from that bottle. Good for you. Siobhan says, ooh, the 27. Nice. It keeps making an appearance because it's very hard to keep it gathering dust. So I'm going to leave it here for a minute because every time I pour it, it needs a minute. I've actually found 15 or 20 minutes. Opens it up lovely. So Wayne says he wishes he has Redbreast 27. Is it classed an essential trip to pick it up? I'm no policeman, but I'd say it is. Oh, Richard's pulling out his Waterford Crystal whiskey glass and joining with the Redbreast 27. Lovely. Great stuff. Casey says, good glory, he needs to get the 27. Jeff and Dee, you're out in Indianapolis. You got to take care of the kids. Grandkids, thanks a million. Great to see you again. Yeah, come back to us next week or maybe even on Tuesday. Let me see what else we have here. Somebody asks if Slieve League Distillers is worth the visit or worth the pour. So does Slieve League Distillers have whiskey? Is that Aharu whiskey or is it something else? I'm not familiar with, I know they're distilling, but I don't know if they've released anything. Maybe they have. Maybe somebody can educate me. Finbar asks if on YouTube, if we can get Redbreast 27 in Canada. That's a great question. I don't know if Billy or Dave knows the answer to that. I know small batches of it have made it to the US. Batch 1, 19, has made it to the US in small quantities. Whether it's made it to Canada or not is a good question. Shane Cunningham has a 27 on the sidelines, waiting for this lockdown to end to enjoy with a few mates. Thankfully, you have your hands on a small sample to get stuck into. Brilliant. Great stuff. Richard also says that he agrees with letting it rest. It opens it up wonderfully. It does. Get a little bit of more surface area there in my glass. But beautiful legs on that whiskey. And this is bottled at 54.6%. So for many whiskies, an ABV of that volume, 54.6% alcohol by volume, would be too much to drink without a drop of water. I've yet to find a whiskey from Middleton that I need to add water to, or that if I've dropped water in, for me, it's improved it. So cask strength, I'm trusting my whiskey to Billy and Dave to know when it's right to drink it. See, that's opening up now so much in a few minutes, so much. I don't know whether it's subliminal or not, but the whole branding of Redbreast 27, like I'm resting this now, the bottle on the box, right? So this beautiful box here, let me turn it up right. So look at the red color, right? Obviously to reference the port, the fact that it's port not port finished, but port aged as well, enriched by rich ruby port. Maybe it's subliminal, but when I'm nosing this whiskey now as it opens up, I'm smelling red. And we've talked about this on previous tastings, the smell of colors. Something smells blue, or something smells green, or something smells red. And maybe it's the subliminal advertising, it's all red here, or maybe red is in my brain. But why I'm saying red is because of plums and ripe, dark stone fruits that come out on the nose. Yet there's this subtle walking through the warehouse on a rainy day outside, and there's a moisture outside, and there's a dry, musty yet welcoming smell inside. That's what I get on the nose of this. I'm going to leave it another minute or two now because it keeps changing. It's like the gift that keeps on giving. Dave McCabe is going to find out if there is availability in Canada, which would be great. Thanks, Dave, for that. Appreciate it. Such a privilege to be able to get hold of whiskies that are 27 years old minimum. So Billy Lighton mentioned on the last call that Redbreast is continuing its tradition of releasing in the multiples of 3 in age statements. You've got 12, 15, 21, 27. So this 27-year-old could have older whiskies in here as well, maybe 28, maybe 29 years old. And it is a marriage of 3 different maturation styles, isn't it? It's ex-bourbon, ex-Oloroso sherry, and then ex-ruby port barrels, port pipes that have been used to age this whiskey. And that is the first time in the modern era. And I don't know whether port made its way into the old recipe or not, but the old approach to aging Redbreast, but it's the first time the port has made its way onto the modern Redbreast lineup. And it's a remarkable addition. And I've seen mention online, people saying that they were concerned that the addition of port would change it from being a Redbreast profile to something very different. Yet it still maintains or manages to retain what has become so familiar a profile that you'd know it's a Redbreast. You'd know that's not a Powers. You'd know that's not a spot whiskey. That is a Redbreast all day long. Up to 31 years of age, Billy says. Thanks for that, Billy. 31 years of age. Imagine that. 31. That's older than most of you here. 31 summers, 31 winters, contracting, expanding those barrels in Irish winters and summers. God, what's happened in the 31 years in Ireland and the world? Amazing that we can have whiskey at this age. It really puts Middleton in this unique, vaunted position of having such aged stock that it can draw upon for a surprise or that nobody saw coming. Oh, it's too much. It's too good. We're not worthy of this whiskey. It's too good for us. It's too good for us. Take it away from us. It's this spice on the tongue, candied dark jelly babies on the sides of my mouth, and chewing on a soft plum, fully ripe, almost about to turn, perfect plum. And the length of it is absolutely amazing. It is Richard, you've hit the nail on the head there. A fruit explosion. It really is, but not a green fruit, not an apple orchard. Dark stone fruits. I shouldn't be talking at all. Just staring at it. Joe reckons my turtleneck is making me very philosophical. No, that's the whiskey. Turtleneck doesn't do anything. I've tried putting on the turtleneck in the morning and being philosophical. It doesn't work. Question about Slieve League. Siobhan has thankfully jumped in with a informed answer for us. Silky whiskey is what they released. Worth checking out. Also, their gin is fabulous. A smack of West Coast of Ireland seaweed. Seaweed making an appearance now in whiskey as well, with the Craic single malt whiskey in the last few weeks, which we've seen. We did an episode of Stories and Sips on it. So I have a question for you now while you're here. I want to know, over the next few weeks, we're all going to be locked away. Stories and Sips is going to be moving to a weekly podcast, a weekly audio podcast, hopefully starting next week. It's been a real challenge trying to produce one that is both video and audio and has photos and images and things like that. So we're moving to a weekly audio podcast to supplement our live stream here. So this live stream isn't going to go away. I'm going to do this for until they drag me away from the chair, coronavirus or not. But what I'd love to know from you is, who would you like me to interview? Who would you love to hear from in the Irish whiskey world? They could be producers, they could be merchants, sellers, blenders, distillers, new distilleries, old distilleries. Who would you like me to interview? And I'll do my very best to get them on the line. And you better believe, Billy or Dave, I'll be coming for ye and hoping to get on your busy schedules at some point. And I'd love to spend a half hour chatting with ye about all the good things that you're doing. So yeah, let me know who you'd like me to interview and who you'd just love to hear more things about. William mentions that this is like candied cherries. Great description, William. Oh, that's fantastic. Oh, and the best news of the night just arrived on the screen. MP says his wife delivered him some wonderful pork chops. So let's keep this going. This is the highlight of the night. If we could highlight this comment even more, MP, we would. There should be some kind of like fireworks here on the screen. Dave has got some feedback for us about Canada or the United States. Let me see. All you can find, it's available in 11 markets worldwide. No mention of Canada, unfortunately. All right, the poor Canadians, they'll have to be taken care of now at some point. Okay, so JJ says he wants me to interview Billy Lighton. I'm writing down all these names now. Who else? Interview US distributors or exporters. Yeah, that's a great point. I can do that. We've got one of them here on the line as well from Southern Glazer. We'll try and interview Steve. Connor says to talk to whomever is behind Celtic Whiskey Store, presumably the top retailer out of Ireland. He must have amazing insights. That is a man called Ali McAlpine, who has been a driving force of whiskey retail and spirit retail in Ireland now for 20 years. Great suggestion. Jack, Jim O'Brien would love to hear more about Thomond Gate. Yeah, I'd like to hear more from Nick when he's got his next stage of development of the distillery and his plan, for sure. Who else would you like to get? Wayne would like to get Brendan Carty from Killowen. Absolutely. Brendan's been on the list for a while. He couldn't talk there in the past 2 weeks because he was busy making hand sanitizer. And can we take a moment to applaud the great work that the distilleries in Ireland are doing to retool very quickly to stop their whiskey production or their gin production or their vodka production, instead manufacture hand sanitizer for frontline healthcare workers in Ireland. Round of applause for all of you for what you're doing. While it has slowed down your production, it has given much needed alcohol for cleaning for front line workers. So great to see the solidarity in Ireland, which is fantastic. Robert Scott Robinson in Ohio would love to hear Billy and Dave, but would also love to hear from the folks that brought the spot whiskies back and how that happened. Well, I think Billy was around when that happened and would have sight, but also there's a few folks in Middleton and also maybe even the Mitchell family. Robert Mitchell might be open to having a discussion as well. That's a great suggestion. JJ said Noel Sweeney would be a good interview. Noel is the master distiller in the what's it called? He's got the whiskies are Furcullen, Powers Court Distillery, formerly of Cooley Distillery in County Louth. Richard says, interview Dave McCabe. Dave, I'm connected with you on Facebook now. There's no avoiding me. I'm going to hunt you down and find you for an old chat. You won't have to do a video, just an old telephone call. Joe Moore for interview. That's it now. Joe, you might be on the hook as well, talking about airport sales. We're going to write you down. Who else do we want? Get Conor McGregor. I'm sure we all want to hear his ideas on the whiskey market and flavor profiles. We do. I definitely want to hear his thoughts on aging and whiskey maturation. Okay, Conor McGregor. Who else? Cillian Murphy from Cork or Peaky Blinders. Well, I doubt Cillian Murphy now from Cork has anything to do with Peaky Blinders, the whiskey, apart from being the actor in the series. But sure, Peaky Blinders, that's an interesting one. So that's owned by it's a Irish whiskey owned by an English company who have shut down production in England in order to build a distillery, apparently, in Ireland. That's the last I heard about them, to move all their production to Ireland, which would be really interesting to see. Dave gave me thumbs up, which is official proof, because I'm going to screenshot it, that he has agreed to do an interview. And you can't be going through legal now or marketing department at Irish Distillers or Pernod now, Dave. This has to be under the table, late at night, phone calls to get this done. Tommy Byrne. Who's Tommy Byrne? Why don't I know? Should I know that name? Tommy Byrne. Let me see. Dahi O'Connell. Yes, we're going to have Dahi O'Connell on maybe next week or the week after. Dahi is sending me some of his peated malt, Bill Phil, and we're going to try that. I am going to try and get him to convince me to like peated whiskey, because I can't stand the stuff. So Dahi's going to come on and talk about his. So I'm writing him down as well. Who else do we want? Joe Moore says we must be desperate. The lockdown is sending us mad if we want him on. Irish Whiskey Academy. Yeah, that's a good one. Maybe we should do a virtual Irish Whiskey Academy. Split the screen. Oh, yes, I know who Tommy Byrne is. Yes, at the Irish Whiskey Academy. Okay. Now I've got it. Okay. Putting all the dots together. And Billy says there's a great story behind the spot whiskies. It'd be great to get that story. And I know that the Mitchell family are very passionate about their family brand and have great stories to tell. Anytime I hear the 8th or 9th generation of the family talking, they share incredible little nuggets. And the Mitchell and Son story is a fantastic one. Dahi is still on the line. He has not only sent me the Bill Phil, but also the Pedro Jimenez 17-year-old single malt. Fantastic. So Dahi, get some rest, because you're going to be online here now maybe next week if we get the whiskey in time. Otherwise, after that, the following week. Ed says, how about somebody from the Irish Whiskey Society? That's a good one as well. We could talk about the growth of Irish whiskey and how that's changed. The barman from Dickie Max. Finn, we can ask Finn at Dick Max. He's a kind of a shy character, but he might. He's too busy working out in his garden gym down the back of Dick Max. Alex Chasko of Teeling. He's always up for telling the story of Teeling. That would be a great way for me to get more familiar with Teeling too, if I was able to get Alex Chasko, who is the American distiller at Teeling. I'm writing that down. And Fionnán O'Connor is an absolute wealth of knowledge. He gave an incredible talk on Irish whiskey. Yeah, Fionnán O'Connor is the author of the book A Glass Apart, which is the kind of a definitive history of single pot still whiskey in Ireland, and a remarkable book, except it is entirely printed in size 6 font. So you need to hold the book up to your eyes like that, or else I'm just getting very old. But I've never found a book that's harder to read from a size perspective. And I've heard that now from 3 or 4 people. So hopefully they release one for old people like me and my eyes. Jack Jim O'Brien says, interview Billy Lighton, Ned Gahan, who is the head distiller at Waterford, Brendan Carty, who is the founder and distiller at Killowen, and Alex Chasko, who is the head distiller at Teeling. Great feedback. Finbar says he'd also like to hear about Connemara and their peated whiskey. Yeah, so that's a good one. So we've got representatives of Beam Suntory on this very call right now. And so maybe Stephen, you might be called upon to do an old interview, or we might get somebody from Beam who'd be willing to chat. And then another one, which would be great to get more information on, because they hinted at it on the last episode or the last live stream, is a development in the world of paddy Irish whiskey. So we have no more information, only to stay tuned, but it'd be great to see some kind of revisiting or some reintroduction of something or some innovation from paddy, which would be great. Yes, somebody agreed with me. Jeff Adams, he couldn't finish the book. The print was just too small and too faint. Every sip now that changes. Oh, you need a knife and fork with it. Take your time with it. That's my dinner there now. Sorted. Oh yes, MP says some info on the release of Michael Collins. Well, maybe that is the innovation that's happening from the Paddy family. Paddy is owned by Sazerac, an American company based out of New Orleans, Louisiana. Do a lot of their bottling in Kentucky, and they acquired the Michael Collins brand a few years back, which was previously ex-Cooley stock, I believe. No longer had a supply contract, went out of business. The brand exists, and I've seen some new images recently of the new bottling of Michael Collins. So that could be something new. And boy, what a bit of history there with Michael Collins, a good Cork man, who was incidentally in Cove, my hometown, the day before he was shot dead in West Cork. He drove over a landmine in Cove, and the landmine never exploded. So luckily, he didn't die in Cove. I could never have had that on our conscience. Bad enough that the Titanic left from Cove without having us done away with Michael Collins as well. But there's a great history to, of course, that statesman and rebel, Michael Collins, which I think would be fantastic to talk about over an old drop of whiskey. Stephen McGuinness says Connemara is his favourite. Connemara is also the whiskey that got Melinda into Irish whiskey, Mrs. Stories and Sips. And it's the whiskey I poured for her at our first tasting where I met her. And we still have the old empty bottle, don't we? We do. I might hit you up, Stephen, to talk about Connemara and peated malt, and I know there's a lot to talk about there and a reintroduction of that as well. Method and Madness. Somebody would like to hear about Method and Madness. That would be a great thing to talk about too. Maybe somebody, one of the micro distillers, or one of the distillers in the micro distillery. They don't have these tiny little micro distillers like 6-inch people running around. Method and Madness would be great as well. Let me see. David Armstrong Boyd at Short Cross Distillery would be great to interview. That's another one, right? We'll add that down. Okay, so now tell me what's in your glass now at this time of the night. Finbar is saying he's only aware of Connemara peated whiskey. Is there other Irish peated whiskey out there? Yes, there's other Irish peated whiskey. We'll be tasting some of it here soon from Dahi O'Connell, from WD O'Connell. There is also Great Northern Distillery makes peated whiskey using Scottish peated malt. All peated whiskey in Ireland is from, it uses Scottish peated malt because Irish maltsters don't make it currently, but that might change. There's also peated casks. So West Cork distillers have a whiskey called Glengarriff where they char the inside of the barrel with peat, which gives an imparting of the peat flavor without it being malted, without the malted barley being dried over a peat heat or a peat smoke. Steve says, Barry, I didn't know you were from Cove. My wife and I stayed in Cove on our first trip to Ireland as we explored the south and the west. Cove's a great spot. Sadly, it was one of the saddest towns in Ireland for a couple hundred years when all the emigrants would have left for the new world from Cove. So waving from the pier there would have been families who knew they were never going to see their loved ones again, their sons and their daughters, and they might have saved up for years so that they might have a better chance. So Cove was a really sad town for many, many years. And of course, the last port of call of the Titanic. We always like to reassure people that it was fine when it left Cove, whatever happened to it out in the Atlantic. But there's a lot of good news in Cove, or there was up to a few months ago, huge cruise ship traffic, which is going to hurt Cove now that that's decimated for the foreseeable future. Massive cruise traffic coming into Cove, and great tourism spot over the past few years. And hopefully that continues and comes back again. So Ed has moved on to, I'm glad to hear you went to Cove, Steve. Thanks for sharing that. I started my work actually in the hospitality industry in Cove, in the Commodore Hotel, serving tables. I was a waiter and a barman in the Commodore Hotel. And that got my first introduction. I remember actually, I started working there in 1990, what would it have been? 1993. And I remember the whiskeys that were on the shelf in the bar. There was the old, what were they called? There was this like a plinth that had the 4 whiskeys. It was like the Redbreast 12, Jameson 12-year-old, Bushmills 16, the something Whiskies of Ireland Celebrated Whiskies of Ireland or something was on the shelf, and that old Redbreast label, I'll never forget it, and the Jameson 12-year-old and the Jameson 1780. That was the first place I remember seeing those whiskies and being aware that there were different styles and different types of whiskey. All right, what have you got in your glass? Ed's on to 3 swallows. Somebody says the Chosen is peated. Yeah, the Chosen is peated. That's right. It is lightly peated from a lot of peated whiskies. There was a period of time in Bushmills when peated whiskey was made in small production quantities for a kind of an experimental way, or according to some people, for an order that was never fulfilled. And so they were left with a bunch of stock of peated whiskey, double distilled peated whiskey that was never used. And so that found its way into Teeling and the Chosen and other whiskies. So yeah, that's true. Let me see. Justin says Cove is a beautiful place, lovely church. Yep, the cathedral, St. Coleman's Cathedral, the largest carillon of bells, 47 bells, bigger than anything in Ireland or England. 47 bells in there. And Steve asked if the Lusitania is connected to Cove. So the Lusitania was torpedoed by a U-boat off the old Head of Kinsale in 1915. The Titanic left Cove in 1912. And in 1915, the Lusitania was torpedoed. It sailed into the line of fire of a U-boat and was sank by the Germans in about 600 feet of water. And the Lusitania would have been about 800 feet long. And when it was torpedoed, it went nose down, bow down, and the bow hit the bed of the ocean, and the stern was still sticking up into the air, and it sank in about 20 minutes. And so a lot of boats would have come out from Cove and Kinsale to rescue those that were drowning in the water. And the bodies and the survivors were indeed brought ashore to Cove. And I remember my grandmother telling me about it, because she was born in 1906, and she was a young girl, so she would have been 9 years of age. She remembers the bodies being brought in and laid out on the ground, on the seafront, on the pier in Cove, under these brown like a brown blanket. And she said she was walking down there with her parents, and all these blankets were laid out. And then she said, out of the corner of her eye, she spotted one moving, and a blanket jumped up and just ran away. The person wasn't dead at all. She got the fright of her life. I remember her telling us that story when we were younger. So the Lusitania was connected to Cove in that way, and the dead were buried in mass graves in Belvelly in Cove. So there's 2 mass graves that were tended to by Cunard for many years, who took care of those graves. But yeah, Cove's got a real rich seafaring history, both good and bad. But it is something that I was fascinated with growing up. So let me see something about Cove. Connor says, as a Cove man, do I have any insights into Roy Keane's whiskey preferences? That's an interview to do on the podcast. So for those in America who don't know who Roy Keane is, he's Ireland's greatest gift to football, to soccer, or so he says himself. Roy Keane used to play for the hometown team called Cove Ramblers in Cove in the late 1980s, early 1990s. And I remember going to his testimonial match, his final match, playing for Cove Ramblers, and he played against Nottingham Forest, the team he went on to play for. The two of them came together to play in Cove. I wouldn't know what he drinks. Would you think he's a whiskey man? I'd say he'd be more of he'd be very fond of a glass of wine now. He'd be too good in his mind for anything other than a bottle of Bordeaux, I'd say. Richard asks if there's a military site at Cove. There's two forts guarding the harbour. There's Fort Mitchell on one side guarding the mouth of the harbour, and the other is called Charles Fort. Is it Charles Fort? Charles Fort, yeah. I think it's Charles Fort. Yeah, is it Fort Mitchell? No, Fort Mitchell was on Spike. Anyway, there's two forts on either side, old military barracks. And then in the harbour itself, there is a naval base. So Ireland's naval base, only naval base, is in Cove. I think there's 5 or 6 ships, and they're mostly for fisheries protection and for exercises in the Mediterranean. Yeah, not a huge amount of military stuff going on there. Stephen said that the whiskies I was remembering in the Commodore Hotel are the whiskies of Ireland. That's right. 6 of them. I wonder, could we name the 6? Redbreast, Bushmills 16, Jameson 1780. What else would there have been? Jameson 1780, Bushmills. Maybe there was Bushmills 10 and 16. And maybe there was Jameson 1780 and Jameson 12, perhaps. Yeah. Wayne says he docked in Cove twice. Loved it each time. So many pubs. Yeah, Cove was famous historically. There was 10,000 people in Cove population at the turn of the around the 1950s. 10,000 people and 50 pubs, one for every 200 people. Great ratio. Julie is onto her yellow spot. Great stuff. John Maritko has just poured a JJ Corrie, the Battalion, first ever Irish whiskey to be finished. It's aging finished in mezcal, ex-mezcal barrels. Connor is on the Redbreast 21. Delicious as it is, still not trumping Lestau. I think Billy would almost agree with that. Louise McGuan from JJ Corrie for interview. Yeah, I've a note out to Louise. She promised she'll come on and chat with me. And what I'm trying to do as well is over the next few weeks, I'm having small distilleries send me some whiskies that we'll try here, and they'll come on with me. So we'll split the screen. So what can happen is I can bring on 6 people on this live stream, and we'll do a split screen chat. They can talk about their whiskies. We can sample them. You can sample them. I'll let you know what they are in advance. You can go out and buy them, or you can, if you have them in your collection, which would be great. Let me see. Stephen McGuinness giving me some clarification on what the 6 of them were. Yes, Jameson 12, Jameson 1780, Jameson 18. Middleton very rare, Bushmills 10, and Bushmills 16. Yeah, that would be right. That's it. Jameson 18. Yeah, I never thought Jameson 18 was on it. How about that? That's a good one. Charles Fort is at Kinsale. Barton says, yeah, it is, but it's overlooking the harbour, the entrance to the harbour. So Cove is in the second biggest natural harbour in the world after Sydney. And there's a fort on either side. So they kind of point at each other, the guns. No gun has ever been fired in the island or in the harbour. It was always just used since Napoleonic times for protection. There was always a fear that there would be an attack. But when Ireland was under British rule, the British used Cork Harbour for their destroyers as a base for their destroyers. So that kind of gave some protection to the area too, knowing that they were there. What else have we got here? Joe says he said he was only having 3 drams and he's broken his promise again. Jameson Gold Reserve for your maybe your final glass. I've heard these promises before, Joe. Jameson Gold Reserve. I need to get hold. I've seen a couple of bottles locally here in California of the Jameson Gold that I haven't pulled the trigger on, that I need to get because there's nowhere else to get that now. It's out of production. Jeff Adams said he visited the memorial down in the Old Head. Oh yeah, that's the memorial to the Lusitania. The word is that on a clear day, if you're flying over in a helicopter or a plane over the site, you can actually see the funnels. 3 of the 4 funnels, you can actually see them, markings of them, because it's buried in such shallow water. It's remarkable how shallow it was. 10 minutes from land. From the coast. And the Old Head is now a gorgeous golf course, says John. It is, yeah, one of the most challenging links courses in Ireland. Wayne said, you said 3 drams tonight, but that's long gone. It is. Sure, I'm onto my 4th here now. It's only 6 o'clock where I am. Okay, Stephen says it wasn't Jameson 18, it was the Redbreast 12. There we go. MP says he's going to donate 2 samples for a tasting of the Jameson Gold. See, that's the whiskey community now. That's what happens. Whiskey community coming together. So is there anything else we can do to bring people together, lads and ladies who are on the call here? This is going to be a minimum weekly live stream. It's going out on Stories and Sips. It's going out on Irish Whiskey Fans of America. It's going out on YouTube, Stories and Sips on YouTube. On Tuesday, we're going to do a live stream with Omar Fitzel from That's Dram Good. That's going to go out on all the channels. We're doing our Jameson tasting for Ohio people, those residents of Ohio, because I'm working with the Jameson team in Ohio. And they're doing fundraisers with me, 3 fundraisers to donate a total of $7,500 from the Jameson Redbreast and Powers team in Ohio to support bartenders in this challenging time. We're going to do 3 of those tastings. Those are going to be virtual events. But what else could we do? Is there anything else? If anybody has any other ideas, feel free to send them to me. Feel free to let me know how I can help kind of end isolation, remove isolation, get you more familiar with Irish whiskies, help you meet each other. I don't know what it is, what we can do, but I think this is what we're doing here with the live streams. This is a great bit of crack. I'm enjoying this. Yeah, Omar's going to be great crack on Tuesday. We did a test run last night. He's not used to going on camera. He's normally behind Twitter. So we're going to put him front and center. And I have a few surprises up my sleeve to put a few tricks on Omar during the tasting too. He won't know what hit him, but that should be a good all night. We'll taste this again. I have to leave some of this now for Tuesday, but we'll do a split screen. And then we might actually bring in some representatives of some of the brands. We've got some words out to folks who want, if they'd be interested in participating for a few minutes and just talking about their whiskies. But we'll do more of that. And we'll definitely do more of the live streams. Yeah. Is there anybody living anywhere where alcohol is tough to get in these tough times? I know in most states now it's considered an essential, a necessity. Look at that, the glass is empty. I have to have more. It's considered a necessity. Anybody having any trouble getting hold of their Irish whiskey? I know that it's been tough to get some things shipped from Irish malts and from Celtic Whiskey Shop. It's been tough to get some shipments to certain states. But I don't think anybody in America anyway is struggling with access to deliveries. Like here in California, we're very lucky. We can get 60-minute delivery to the door of whiskey. Yesterday, John Quinn from Tullamore Dew organized a delivery of Tullamore Dew single malt 14-year-old to the door in 60 minutes so that we could taste it. Me and Omar could taste it next week, which is remarkable that could be done. Let me see. Peter says, Wayne says virtual tours of micro distilleries would be cool. That'd be amazing to do. I wonder how we could figure that out. I'm going to write that down though. Maybe we could certainly have Brendan Carty in Cologne walk around the distillery while he's on air with his phone. I'm not sure about the micro distillery in Middleton. I know you've got to leave your phone hidden away in a box there when you're walking around the distillery with all the alcohol in the air. Wayne says, I love the way you looked at the wife when you said you have to have more of the Redbreast 27. If you could only see her face now, she has a smile, but it's a curious smile. People saying that the shipping changes, MP, the shipping changes in Ireland to the US have hurt. Thank goodness for Germany. Oh, interesting. Where do you get your whiskey in Germany, MP? Siobhan says, John King is king. He is. Interesting point. I don't know if I've got any bottles of it here. Maybe I do. But if you've got a bottle of Jameson at home, somebody told me this fact, maybe Stephen McGuinness, maybe you know more of this, or Dave McCabe. Old bottles of Jameson and many of the current bottles of Jameson have a paper seal on the neck of the bottle, and it's got a serial number on the neck, and every serial number starts with the letters JQ, and JQ actually belonged to John Quinn, who is now the global brand ambassador for Tullamore Dew, who many years ago worked for Irish Distillers, and his job was to record the serial numbers. And his name has been immortalized in that serial number, his initials. That's the myth or the story I heard anyway from somebody who I believe knew. I wonder if that's true, if anybody knows. But yeah, he's a legend, a man who has been in the whiskey industry for many, many years. And that I'd love to, actually, he'd be a great interview if we could get hold of John Quinn. I'm going to write that down. Talk of Ireland would be perfect too. Yeah, that's true. There's so many Americans here now as well, that little stories of Ireland. One of the things I'm going to do on Instagram over the coming days is I'm going to start sharing a picture of Ireland that I've taken on my whiskey travels related to a distillery or near a distillery. It might be like the other day I shared pictures near Dingle in the Facebook group, but I'll share these on Instagram every day just to kind of remind us of the island of Ireland that's going to open up to us again soon, and we'll all go over and we'll bring our empty suitcases and our open minds and our checkbooks to buy whiskey and pints and drinks in every town we go to. But a beautiful countryside awaits us when these restrictions on our travel lift. So yeah, we'll talk more about Ireland for sure. What else have we got here? Golf talk about Ireland, says Cole. I'm the wrong man to be talking about golf. The only connection I've ever had with a course was crashing a golf cart into a bridge on a golf course. I wouldn't know one end of a club from another. Fine Dram is the place to order out of the Netherlands, apparently, to get your whiskey. Julie would love to hear from Billy about Method and Madness. Yeah, I think we should try and find out more about Method and Madness. And I know some Method and Madness is coming to the US, which is good. And I should be able to get hold of that soon as well. Robert Scott is signing off. Thanks, Robert, for joining us. Greg asks if Paddy will release an original recipe expression. And I know that Siobhan is still here now. If she wants to sneakily give us an answer to that, feel free to. Stephen McGuinness thinks it's a myth that John Quinn's initials are on the bottles of Jameson. We'll have to find out about that. I'm going to dig into that because I love the story and I'd hate for it to be a myth. Caitlin Volts in Cincinnati. Hey, good to see you. She says she's having trouble getting Dargailloch. I think, and she said the only place you've had it is Kelly's. Any leads? Kelly's, that fine spot in Cove. Maybe the greatest bar in Cove, Kelly's Pub. Caitlin and her family, we all went to Ireland, down to Cove together. How many of us were there? 8 or 9 of us. And we all went into Kelly's Pub. Great old spot. And they had Dargailloch there. So Dargailloch is the Middleton very rare expression that is finished in Irish oak. And Dargailloch is the Irish language for Irish oak. It is hard to get. It is coming to Ohio. You'll be delighted to hear. We don't have a time on it, but I'm going to find out. I'm going to ask Stephen from Southern Glazer about it. But we need our Dargailloch. Hi to Caitlin and Kevin anyway in Cincinnati. Big wave from Melinda over there as well. Stephen says that John Quinn is a legend, one of Ireland's whiskey heroes. He is indeed. So MP said he'd love to find Knockrath in a place that can ship. So I have found it in a place that can ship, and that is the Celtic Whiskey Shop. But they won't ship to your state, they'll ship it to my state, and that's the challenge. So you're going to have to pay double shipping to get it to a shipping address in America. But you didn't hear that from me because we're not supposed to be flouting bootlegging laws here on the live stream. We'll be kicked off. Facebook won't allow us on at all. Jeff Adams tried to place an order. Let me see. Never heard back from Irons. Okay, not sure about that. Caitlin's waving at us. Woohoo! Julie has had the Knockrath or Dargailloch in DC at the Dubliner. I have Dargailloch. Here's Melinda, Mrs. Stories and Sips in for a in-comment section conversation with Caitlin. I have some Dargailloch waiting for me in Ireland, but here's my challenge. When am I going to get back to Ireland? We don't know when it's going to be, so I need to figure out a way to ship my Dargailloch from Ireland over here, and I'm going to work on it. I'm going to try it. So stay tuned. Dargailloch is a beautiful drop of whiskey and such an Irish success story that we're now trying a little bit of Irish oak in aging whiskey. Not something that's been done a whole lot historically. There's a great interview with Ger Buckley, who's the master cooper in the Middleton Distillery, on Whiskey Chats. Go to Whiskey Chats on Spotify or iTunes. My buddy Laurie has started a podcast interviewing some people in Ireland. And I love listening to Ger Buckley, the cooper, talking about anything to do with wood and wood management because he's an absolute oracle of knowledge. But they had a great conversation about the origin of the oak or the origin of wood for Irish whiskey and where it would have come from and Ireland's contribution and indeed Cork's contribution to Irish wood and maturation historically, which is a great interview to go check out. Paul says that it's okay. Let me see. He said, Facebook won't understand the accent. They won't even know I said bootleg. Probably not. I'd say the challenge would be if I start playing some music now in the background to kind of give us some ambiance, some mood. Suddenly Facebook will recognize they'll recognize the copyright. They'll shut me down. I was going to play a bit of Glenn Hansard or something. He wants me to work together to get him his Dargailloch. I'm not going to be going around all the distributors now and shippers to be getting you your whiskey, you chancer. But a nice try. So Irish Whiskey Fans America is the group, lads and ladies. I encourage you to join it. It's where there's a lot going on. Like I think we had in the past, believe this or not, in the last 28 days, there's been 40,000 interactions on the group. Not one of them has been about selling. Not one of them has been about spamming. And those 40,000 interactions are likes, comments, posts. A ton of engagement. So Irish, American, wherever you're from, jump in there. Get into that group and have a bit of crack. It's brilliant. It's really great fun, and I'm really enjoying meeting people in there. Cole says Glenn Hansard or his band The Frames. Yeah, we have a fan. Yeah, love Glenn Hansard. I've been we've traipsed around the world chasing him into pubs he's not in and concerts he is in, just to hang out with him. And we've had a great old time. Love Glenn Hansard and The Frames. Yeah, you're showing your music knowledge there. Back to the days of The Frames. Ed says that Dargaelic appears on Ohio's list. Yeah, it does. So what happens, Ed, is that sometimes you'll see something pop up on the list. So Ohio is a controlled state, which means that it monitors and controls and manages the inventory list for Ohio of what can be sold by retailers. What you'll start to see is that long before something appears on the shelf, it gets listed, and it gets listed so that stores can add it to their POS system. That way that when it does finally hit the shelves, they're ready to go. So it's kind of the announcement to the retailers that it's coming, but it could be months off. And the American system is a disaster. I can't get answers. It doesn't matter which state you're in. It's tough to get answers. I've been very lucky to have close contact with the distributors in Ohio for all of the Irish Distillers products who can give me the best knowledge of what they know. But in other states, it's impossible to get hold of knowledge. Siobhan says that she was working in Sonny Malloy's the day the Dargaelic and the Pearl was delivered, a moment she'll never forget. I noticed how you answered that there now, Siobhan, but you didn't answer anything about the new paddy that everyone wants. I see what you're up to there, but let's dwell on this one. So Sonny Malloy's pub in Galway, brilliant pub in Galway, Shop Street. Is it Shop Street, High Street? I always get the streets mixed up. Lived in Galway for years and it's always confused Shop Street, High Street, and Quay Street. But yeah, right in the heart of Dublin, or heart of Galway, Sonny Malloy's great whiskey bar. So Dargaelic was delivered on the Pearl. So the Pearl, if anybody has ever heard of the Pearl, was up until a month ago the most expensive Irish whiskey released from the Midleton distillery. And there was 117 bottles, and it was released to celebrate the 30th anniversary of the Midleton Very Rare series, so in 2014. And there is a bottle of it in Sonny Malloy's. In fact, there's a bottle open in Sonny Malloy's because I know somebody's gone in to order 2 measures of it in there during the Galway races one year, and Siobhan, you might have poured it for them. But I think they have a closed bottle too, do they? But I know that you can actually, I think that bottle when it was released at the time was €6,000, and you'd be lucky now to find one for €16,000. But you can get a flight of whiskies in Sonny Malloy's today that includes the Pearl, I think Midleton 26-year-old, Midleton 30-year-old, which is incredible. So thanks for that. Steve is signing out. Thanks for joining, Steve. Julie, thanks for telling us about the Tua glass. Yeah, that's Skellig Michael there in the base. That's it. Also used in Star Wars. Not the glass, but Skellig Michael. Siobhan, sheepishly avoiding the Paddy story there. You're grand. We'll come back to you. Jeff says, are you only looking for the newest release of Dargaelic, or is Bluebell Forest doable? Well, Jeff, in Ohio, none of them are available, but I know they can be shipped in. Some of them are still on shelves on online retailers, which is the right point. So yeah, if you are looking for other Dargaelics, Caitlin and Kevin, they could be out there. But the new Knockrath Dargaelic, my understanding is that it's maybe the greatest one yet. So hopefully we can get hold of that soon. So I'm going to wrap up here now shortly. We have had an incredible night. I thought I'd go on here now for an hour. We're here 2 hours and 20 minutes into it, breaking all records. Thanks everyone for joining. Please join us in the Facebook group, Irish Whiskey Fans of America. Join us on Stories and Sips on Facebook, Stories and Sips on YouTube. I'm Irish Whiskey Barry on Instagram, and I'm Irish Whiskey BC on Twitter. I'd love to have you join on any of these tastings. I'd love to have you ask me questions. Reach out anytime. If anybody sends me in a question, I don't have a fraction of the knowledge about Irish whiskey that some of the folks have here, the likes of Stephen McGuinness and Siobhan, and obviously Billy and Dave and Omar. Incredible knowledge that I'm always in awe of and that I'm learning from every day. But if I don't know the answer, I'm going to ask somebody and I'm going to learn it and I'm going to find out and I'll share it back with you. So please share your knowledge or share your questions, and the folks here will share their knowledge. Stephen, now, for me applauding him, wants me to send him a sample of the 27-year-old. There'll be nothing left. This will be gone by Tuesday. There's 3 measures left in this and a half one in the glass. That'll be gone by Tuesday. So there'll be none left. We'll see what we can do. I won't say no. But yeah, join me online on the other channels, everybody. Honestly, I'm thrilled that I get to hang out with you all. These are tough times. We're isolated, we're quarantined. We have to come together and chat with people that get us, that get our fascination and our obsession with things like Irish whiskey. And I'm delighted to be kind of in the company of all of you. So keep the questions coming in on all the channels. Find me in the Facebook group. Find me on Stories and Sips. And I'm going to start working through that list of folks to contact for the podcast. And I'm going to be moving towards a podcast very soon. That's weekly, hopefully starting next week. Let me see the one last comment here, because amazingly, Billy Lighton has hung in till this wee small hours of the morning with an answer. We don't see direct evidence of whiskey being matured in Irish oak, but we have seen that Irish coopers have used Irish oak. Yeah, so Irish oak is used for finishing today. We have no evidence that it's any good for maturing over the long haul. It may not have the grain that's needed for that. So again, thanks everybody. Thanks for joining. We will talk to you all soon. Billy, Dave, Stephen, Siobhan, Greg, John, Jeff, thanks all for your contributions. Thanks for chiming in. Thanks for educating me on whiskey and for hanging out with me in this time of social isolation. Go on away and tend to your children or go to bed. I'm now going to spend some time with my wife. Staunch, everybody. Cheers, Billy. Good health to you too.